So, Middag, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Royal Cornwall Hospitals NHS Trust held in public. Particularly warm welcome to everybody who's joining us here in Truro and everybody who's joining us online, and particularly, of course, members of staff and members of the public who may have joined us. I've got a few people to welcome. The first one is Kim O'Keefe, Acting Chief Executive. I feel I've already welcomed Kim quite often, but this is actually her first board in public as Acting Chief Executive. She's already reminded us that there's only 231 sleeps until Christmas. But it's very good to see you here in this new capacity, Kim, and we all wish you every success in the new role. I would also like to welcome Dr. Rebecca Hopkins, who has joined us as our Clinical Non-Executive Director. Just to give you warning, Becky, if you wanted to say a few words of introduction when I've finished, please do, just to give you advance warning. But Becky is a GP in St Agnes, and this is a very important moment for us because traditionally we've had acute physicians from other hospitals as our clinical non-executive director, but by appointing Rebecca as a general practitioner, we're trying to send a very strong signal to the community in Cornwall that primary care and general practice is really important to us as an acute hospital, and that we want to reach out into the primary care community to create a neighbourhood health service for the people of Cornwall. So welcome, Becky. Is there anything you would like to say?
Well, thank you very much, Chair. That's a really warm welcome, and thank you so much for the last 2 weeks for everybody that I've spoken to so far. Really looking forward to working with everyone more. I'm a GP, as you said, David. I've been planned care and cancer clinical lead for the Integrated Care Board and Referral Management Service lead as well. So I've been involved in quite a lot of community optimisation and system development. Really looking forward to bringing a community, neighbourhood and general practice perspective to the board. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Becky. We look forward to having you as part of the team. I'll come on to later to the committees that the new members will be sitting on. Could I also welcome Ray Hall, who I believe has joined us online, Lindsay. Ray is the Chief Executive of Volunteer Cornwall, and she's joining the board as an Associate Non-Executive Director. And really for similar reasons as Rebecca has joined us, we want to reach out to the voluntary community and social enterprise sector, which plays such a huge role in the health and welfare of people in Cornwall. And it seems very sensible to us that we should have a senior person from the VCSE sector sitting on our board. Again, Ray, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself and say hello.
Yes, thank you. Hello, I look forward to joining next time in person. I'm not officially official yet until after my induction next week, but I'm very excited to be able to bring the voice of the voluntary sector more visibly, audibly, perhaps, into this process, and and to being an active participant. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I look forward to working with you as well. I'd also like to welcome Brian Johnson. I'm hopeless on job titles, but I'm going to try for Director of Estates and Facilities, something like that. I've talked to Kim and others about this, including the non-executive directors. But when you think of all our enabling strategies, we've always had people and finance represented at the table, but we haven't had infrastructure other than IT. So it makes sense that our buildings and our facilities management and our estates development is represented around the table. So Brian has very kindly agreed to join us at the board table for future meetings. Again, Brian, I don't know if you want to say hello.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I just welcome the opportunity to engage further with Trust Board. I know I've engaged with many of you on an ad hoc basis at board meetings in the past, but yeah, welcome the opportunity to engage not just on the matters regarding the infrastructure in our estate, but hopefully I can contribute on wider topics and content through the board. Thank you.
Well, thanks so much. One of the things we encourage is, regardless of people's discipline, everyone is encouraged to contribute to every conversation. So I would also like to welcome Paul Hargreaves, who's the Deputy Director of People and Organisational Development. And it's particularly apposite that Paul has joined us today because the Chief People Officer is unable to join us, because this will be Paul's last public board. He's going on to greater things as Chief People Officer in Portsmouth and the Isle of Wight. So can I just thank you for everything you've done for this trust, Paul, and wish you every success in the future. Thank you. And then finally, by way of introductions, a bit of a sadder one. I would like to say, because this is her last public board, that somebody who perhaps lives a bit beyond the limelight, Sue McFadden, our Deputy Company Secretary, this will be Sue's last public board, will be able to embarrass you and shower you with praise at the private board in June, Sue, because you'll still be with us then. But I would like to place on record the huge support that you've given to the board. And I would also like to thank you for everything you've done, not just as Deputy Company Secretary, but also for all your work, for example, in patient complaints and quality improvement for many years in the Trust. So, Sue, you've been somebody who's got an absolute commitment to the higher standards of corporate governance. And I think it would be appropriate if we could just thank you in public today, and perhaps thank you in the usual way. And we've also welcomed Bernie George to the board table previously, because Bernie has been acting chief nurse or chief nursing officer. But I think this may be your first public board. Is that right, Bernie?
Sure, yeah.
So could we also welcome you to your first public board, although we've already welcomed you to the board itself. It's great to see you here. Okay, so welcome everybody. And could I just do a little bit of housekeeping before we start the meeting? So we live stream the meeting, and we will be placing a recording on the Trust's YouTube channel so that anyone can watch it after the meeting. Could I just remind members of the public that Teams Live has the feature of live subtitles, so you can access subtitles by clicking on the screen. And in terms of the board discussions, if we could avoid the use of acronyms, and I always say this and we never do, but particularly with so many new members, it would be really helpful if we could spell things out rather than use acronyms. We don't have any fire alarm drills planned for today, so if the alarm does sound, we should vacate the building and gather in the car park. And then could I just ask members of the public if they do have any questions? We will come to questions from the public towards the end of the agenda, and there is a Q&A, question and answer function on Microsoft Teams, and the Company Secretary will review the questions as per the protocol which is set out on the agenda. So we'll ask the questions at item 26, and the Company Secretary will ask the question on your behalf. The relevant director will respond if possible. Otherwise, we'll arrange for a written answer to be given and included in the minute of the meeting. We're planning to conclude at around 1:30, but could I just say to board members, clearly we need to take the time we need for the public board, but if we do finish early, we've got an awful lot to consider this afternoon in the board meeting in private. So with your agreement, if we do finish early, we could take a break and perhaps start the private board meeting early, because I know that many of you have got caring responsibilities and need to catch trains and so on. I don't think we've got any apologies from board members. I'm looking at the Company Secretary. But we do have apologies from Alison Thorne-Henderson, Dual Chief People Officer, and from Niamh Lamond, who is Associate Non-Executive Director. You'll recall that Niamh is in full-time employment at the moment in Swansea University. She's now announced her retirement from August. So she will be coming back to Cornwall and she'll have plenty of time for board work after August. And then we've got colleagues joining us at item 5, Emily Callan and Aneurin Campbell-Dowrick. for the board story, Bernie, which Bernie will be leading. So if that is all by way of introduction, anything from you, Company Secretary?
Thank you.
Can we move on to item 2, declaration of board member interests relevant to this meeting? Does anybody have any interest to declare? If not, can we go on then to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous public board meeting held on the 5th of March. Are board members content with those as an accurate record of the meeting? Thank you. And then we go to item 4, which is the matters arising and the action log, which we don't go through in detail, but it's there for you. First of all, I'll ask the Company Secretary if there's anything she wants to raise.
Thank you, Chair. A number of actions are proposed as complete today, and we'll continue to monitor those in progress.
Thank you. Is there anything any members of the board would like to raise? If not, then shall we keep moving? That does take us to item 5, the board story. Could I hand over to Bernie George, the Acting Chief Nursing Officer, to take us into this, please?
Thank you, Chair, and a really warm welcome to Emily and Anurin online. So none of us can really underestimate the importance of nutrition and healing. Equally, the voice of patients and what matters to them must be front and centre of multi-professional working. Mr. Cliff was an inpatient for 10 weeks with a diagnosis of colon cancer. And during his admission, his treatment had to be reversed and an incision made in his throat due to the need for multiple NG tube insertions. Mr. Cliff expressed a strong wish for the tubes to be removed and to work towards sustaining himself nutritionally. And the clinicians agreed to trial this approach on understanding that the tubes would be reinserted if this was not successful. With the support of his surgeon, Mr. Clift began reintroducing food in small amounts. This gradual approach proved effective and his swallowing steadily improved. He was then supported by the nutrition team and continued to make progress. This experience highlights the importance of listening to patients and supporting them when they wish to explore an alternative approach to regaining nutritional independence, and is a real credit to those that worked with him. Pete.
My name is Peter Clift. I was a patient at Trelisk for 10 weeks with colon cancer. If ever you had colon cancer, go to Trelisk, they'll look after you. The hospital experience to me was very, very good, especially in the high intensity ward, because I remember a day after the operation, I was out of bed. I was walking around, out eating, but then it didn't work. It had all to be pumped out because something was wrong. The operation now had to be reversed, and keyhole surgery was no longer any good, so I had to be cut open and have everything reversed. And couldn't talk. I had tubes down my throat. Eventually, they cut my throat to give more access. And then things started to improve from that point in time. Doesn't sound like an improvement, but it was. But the tubes, oh, they were horrible. I was fed night and day. All night, you could only lie at a certain angle, otherwise you could choke. And that's not easy. If you want to relax, you want to lie back, but 30 degrees, I think it was, 25, 30 degrees. That was the point where things were getting a bit sticky, because they was in for weeks, weren't they? Oxygen, a tube, and another tube, and taking tablets with these tubes down your throat was no joke, right? And a lot of room left. But nonetheless, we got through, and we came to a point where the guy who looked after me came to see me, see how I was getting on, and I said, I really could do without these tubes. And he said, no, you can't do without them because you could not sustain yourself. And I said, how do you know? How do you? Well, he said, that's my job. And I said, well, why not give it a try? And if it doesn't work, you stick the tubes back in. He said, well, if you're prepared for that, he said, I'll give it a try. So the tubes came out, and I remember the first meal I had with the tubes out was a roast dinner, proper. This is in the hospital. And I remember picking up a piece of carrot, thinking to myself, now I wonder, is this going to taste like carrot or like everything else? Yeah, it tasted like a carrot. It was beautiful. I couldn't stop eating. There's a long time, even with the tubes in, that I wasn't allowed to eat. And then there came a time where I could eat. And my surgeon, she said to me, you try everything that you fancy. She says, doesn't matter if you have one spoonful or one forkful from each dish and the rest is chucked away. That's not your problem. Your problem is to get in to eat, to sustain yourself. So you just have everything that's going, see how you get on, and don't worry about the rest. And that's exactly what I did. And the waste I had was terrible. I really felt bad about it. But there's nothing I could do. I can't eat that, can't eat this. But gradually, over weeks, I suppose, things got a lot better. And I think I'm eating most things now, aren't I? Yeah. And enjoying it. And it's easy to eat. This is causing me no problems at all. Not really. Bit sore at times, but apart from that, no real problems at all. I had a test where I had to go to this, another specialist, and all these different foods, and I was wired up to something or other, and to see how my swallowing, see if it was working right. And everything, I had 12 different foods, I think, and everything went the way that it should. He said, there's no reason at all why you can't. They thought I would choke myself, but that was it. It was okay. But it must be awful being on their side, because they don't know how I feel, but they know what could happen if things go wrong, and they can't see any reason why it should go right. So you've got this conflict of interest all the time. They're looking after your well-being and want to save your life, and all you want to do is get better, get this stuff out. What is it, you see? That guy, that nutrition guy, I forget his name, I'm terrible with names. He was A1, he couldn't have done anything better than what he did, which was, against his better judgment, allow me to have my own way and have these flipping tubes taken out, and that meant the world to me. Even if they had to go in again, the fact that he listened and was prepared to do it against his better judgment, but he did it. They mad also. I was listened to by Simon, bless him. He's my hero. Thank you, Simon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie.
Emily, Aneurin, anything you want to add?
Hi there. Yeah, I'm just grateful for the opportunity to showcase the role of dietitians and particularly nutrition in improving patient outcomes and experience whilst in hospital. I think Mr. Cliff's story is just a great example of, making sure that we have a patient-centered approach to our care and making sure we're listening to patients when they express their wishes. As he alluded to, I did have my concerns about how well he would do nutritionally, when we were taking the tubes out. But, he went on to prove me wrong. And, we took the tubes out and actually he managed to eat really well. And I'm just really pleased to see how well he's doing after what was quite a complicated and rocky time in hospital.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking through Nai's computer, so hopefully you can hear me. But just to add to that, these patients they don't get better without the proper nutrition. And Mr. Cliff in particular went through the rainbow of the nutrition we can offer, from parenteral nutrition to being nil by mouth to NG feeding to oral intake, and no doubt some ensures along the way somewhere. And it just proves just how impactful that proper nutrition at the right time, listening to what your patient says, can have on the patient outcomes, and just look at how well he's doing now. And I'd just like to give a nod to a nutrition steering group as well whilst I'm here, because so much good work is going on through what we do with the nutrition steering group, so much improvement work, which I'm sure you all hear about. And just big thank you for everything, and the input that people have into that group, and to everybody working on the ground. And we've seen a real, I think, culture change and the trust attitude towards nutrition, and nutrition being more at the top of people's agendas. And I think it's really showing a difference in what we do.
Thanks to you and Ian in terms of your leadership of that.
Thank you, Bernie. And could I thank you as well, Emily and Aneurin. I'm just going to ask if members of the board have got any comments or questions for you. Isabel.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Isabel Down. I'm the Vice Chair and I chair the Quality Committee, and nutrition has certainly appeared on our agenda for discussion on more than one occasion. And I just want to congratulate the team on the work that they did with Mr. Cliff, because I think it was a really important lesson for all of us at the board as well, to really understand the importance of listening to your patient. And being prepared to step outside perhaps the guidebook or the rule book occasionally to meet the needs of that patient. And I just wonder, Bernie and team, whether how important it is for this work to continue, particularly with those patients where we're concerned about deconditioning the longer they stay in hospital, and therefore nutrition is got to be absolutely essential in terms of helping manage that deconditioning. So thank you, team. But Bernie, I'm hoping that nutrition is right up there in terms of the deconditioning work.
It is, and it features obviously in our deconditioning harm report that we bring through, recognising that we needed to get greater prominence in terms of some of those metrics around assessment and interventions. So long may that continue in terms of the programme that we've got. So that features through our Part 2 Quality Assurance Committee meeting with CFT in that joint reporting.
Robin Jones is our Chief Operating Officer.
Thank you, David. And thank you to Mr. Cliff for being so brave to share the story with us. For me, really important point picking up on Isabel's comment about listening to our patients, and thank you to the team that listened to what was most meaningful for that patient. And I think that's a really good example of what we're trying to see more of. What may seem really small to us listening in is so huge to each individual, and actually it ties together with some of the other work that we're doing. So any members of the public that are watching, we actively encourage you to talk to us, to tell us, this is meaningful for me, this is what it means for me. We can make a difference through that. And later when we talk about our urgent care report, we'll be talking around clinical operational standards from the Getting It Right First Time team known as GIRFT. And we will be launching posters so that people can tell us if you think we're not delivering those standards for you or your loved ones. In that exactly that same spirit of when we know we can listen, and when we listen, we must act. So really powerful there to see the real impact of listening and acting. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay. I'm going to bring Kim in, but I've had a message that some people are struggling to hear what we're saying. So I know I'm as guilty as anyone, but could we speak up if we can? Thank you. Kim.
Thank you both, and thank you for mentioning the Nutritional Steering Group and your contribution to that. It's really powerful, as you say, how you can change the culture or the ethos of an agenda. And often I think we take nutrition and hydration as a given, but it isn't. It takes a lot of work. So I suppose my question is, what else would you need from Bernie or any member of the board to make sure this still remains front and centre in our minds when there's so many competing agendas?
Yeah, it's good question, Kim. Thank you. And I think that it's really important that we recognise. Oh, 2 seconds. Yeah, really important that we recognise that nutrition is everybody's issue. It's for everybody to act on. So that's my ask is for everybody. If that you've got a patient or even a relative or a colleague or or anybody that you're kind of looking out for them from a nutritional point of view and highlighting when things need to be escalated. So make that referral to the dietitian, have a chat with whoever needs to be chatted to kind of escalate that care. Nutrition can make such a massive impact on somebody's journey through the hospital. And we know that if they get the right nutrition, then length of stay will be less. And so then they get home and they get back to where they should be quicker. So just highlighting early as possible in a patient's journey through the hospital, the nutritional care that they need is really important. And in terms of the people that we've got around the table here, that ongoing contribution and allowing nurses and representatives to attend our nutrition steering group monthly. We've got nutrition champions that's is more like healthcares and ward level nurses attend to keep that really on the ground work going and keep supporting everything that we do. And that's we really appreciate that.
Thank you. We've got Uzma Bozai, who's a non-executive director online. Uzma?
Thanks, David. Thank you for sharing that story. It was really heartwarming to hear that despite a very challenging period of time, he was able to really kind of find a way, a kind of constructive way through to his own improvement. But my question was really around the communications around nutrition. Is there anything that you feel would, as a board, we could help support you in delivering those very key messages, either before patients, if they have a planned surgery and are coming to us, and obviously post, during and post as well. I'm a very big advocate of the power of nutrition and feel that it's possibly takes second kind of a kind of backseat to some of the other very valuable treatments we offer, but obviously very necessary. So anything that you feel we can improve communication wise would be really great to know.
Yeah, great. You've got my brain spinning a little bit there on that one. I think some of the communications that we saw over the deconditioning and the deconditioning focus on nutrition through January to March, and then our nutrition hydration week that we did in March as well, the communications that went out there trust-wide, like using the screensavers, etc. I think that really worked and was really impactful. And we did see it in some of the audits that come through Nutrition Steering Group. There was, better compliance with MUST, which is the malnutrition screening tool, better compliance of the completion of those and things. So I think in terms of communication, I just think it's really important that we just all keep talking about it, that it does become the top of everybody's agendas. Because like I say, people don't get better unless they're eating well or they've got the right nutrition. So it really has to be the cornerstone and foundations of everything that we do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Uzma. I'm going to move on unless there are any other contributions. But in doing so, could I thank Emily and Anirin and all of our nutrition dietitian team for the outstanding work you do. I think it's great you've had an opportunity to be showcased at the board. And could I also thank, possibly through you, if it's possible, if you're in touch with him, could we thank Mr. Clift for telling his story in such a human and accessible way? I'm sure we all empathise with his situation, but we're really struck by the support that he had throughout his journey. So we wish him and his family well. And thank you, Bernie, and everybody involved for the board story. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. So if we could move on now then to item 6, which is my report. I don't go through it, it just lies on the table, but I hope it's useful for you to see what I've been up to. There's a couple of things I just have to mention to you. I mentioned earlier about the committee memberships, and I'd like to ask the board to approve that Dr. Rebecca Hopkins should serve on the Quality Assurance Committee, if the board is content. Thank you very much. And I apologise, there's a misspelling on the agenda paper. It should be Niamh Lamond with a D at the end, not Lamond, but that Niamh Lamond should serve on the Finance and Performance Committee. Is that okay with you, Adrian?
Yeah, very good, thank you.
As you know, the idea is that with succession planning, Niamh would become chair of the Audit and Risk Assurance Committee as a qualified accountant once Adam sadly has to leave us. But the constitution of that committee means she can't sit on it at the moment, but she can observe it, but she can be a member of FPC, so that makes sense. And then I'd like to welcome back, because technically his term of office was completed, Aled Jones as Associate Non-Executive Director. Aled and I have had a conversation, and I've consulted the non-executive directors, and we've reappointed Aled for a further year, the 4th year as non-executive director. But I think he and I are completely aligned that it makes sense, given that we've got 2 university education and research partners, that we should rotate the non-executive higher education membership, possibly for, say, 3 years for Plymouth and 3 years for Exeter, so that both universities are represented over a period of time around the board table. But I think that's acceptable to you, Aled. So Aled has been appointed for a further year, and we're very grateful for all you do to contribute to our work, Aled. But after the next year, then we'll be looking for somebody from Exeter University. And maybe one day, Aled, you'll come back. But in the meantime, I know you're very happy to help and support us. So if that's acceptable to the board, that's the way that we will proceed. I'd like to congratulate our partner trust, Cornwall Partnerships Foundation, NHS Foundation Trust, for winning one of the regional awards for neighbourhood health. And we bask in their reflective glory, but it's their award. But I think it's an award really for everything that everybody has done in Cornwall to progress neighbourhood health. So congratulations to CFT. And I'd also like to congratulate our former Chief Executive, Steve Williamson, for being named as one of the top 50 Chief Executives in England. I'm not sure if it's England or the UK, but anyway, one of the top 50 Chief Executives in the Health Services Journal list, which came out yesterday. I was in touch with Steve yesterday. He's enjoying life in Morecambe Bay, but sends his best wishes to all of you. Are there any questions or comments for me on my report? Adrian?
Yeah, it's not actually on your report, it's the verbal update that you've just given. A few months ago, I was fortunate enough to see a presentation from the bereavement team, who I understand from one of the communications won Bereavement Team of the Year. And ever since I came into the NHS, one of my mantras has been that we don't celebrate success enough. There's a lot of good work going on at the Trust that we don't get to see. So I wondered if we were awarded any national awards, whether the team could come here for us to present them with their certificate. I think it's a way of starting to address that issue.
Yes, thank you, Adrian. For those who don't know, Adrian chairs our Finance and Performance Committee. I was wondering about that as well, Adrian, and perhaps I could ask Kim to comment. The other thing I was going to mention is I'm not sure how proactive, and it's just that I don't know, I'm not sure how proactive we are at seeking awards, because part of getting awards is to apply for them and to have them in good enough shape to be shortlisted and then awarded. So it's partly what I call grantsmanship as well as actually getting an award. And whether we're good enough at that, because when I looked at the list of awards yesterday, and I thought about all the things the Royal Cornwall does, I was kind of thinking, well, why aren't we on that list? So a couple of things for us to ponder there, Kim, if you'd like to respond.
Yeah, we used to do it, and somewhere along the line, I think it's got lost. But absolutely something we can consider. I think it also then stimulates that interest in applying. But I do think sometimes these forms are quite complicated. It might be, how do we look at supporting very busy teams in being able to do that? So, Ella, I might give that, if we can give that some thought as part of the task and finish.
We do always try to apply for the national awards when they come up, but we look for opportunity. And the neighbourhood award, we very much were part of that award because it's a whole system approach to the neighbourhood. So whilst the FT hosts the service and are named on the award, we contributed to the production of that bid, which we along with the local authority and other system partners. So we're really proud, and we'll actually be attending the award ceremony with them in Manchester. So that'll be a great display of kind of what can be achieved when the system pulls together.
Plymouth won 3 awards, so it might be worth talking to them about how they do it as well. Uzma, I just wonder, as the non-exec lead for strategic communications, whether you had anything to add?
Thanks, David. No, just great idea, Adrian. I think finding ways that our comms team can share those great stories is definitely on our radar, and I know the comms team have built it into the strategy to find different ways to highlight those success stories, patient stories, staff stories. So hopefully we'll be seeing lots more of it.
So by way of recording the conversation, Lindsay, would it be acceptable to say that the board would like the chief executive to take account of the comments about celebrating success and pursuing awards and achievement, to be able to wave a flag over the work of the Royal Cornwall, and see how that adds to the engagement and staff satisfaction culture strategy? Executives happy with that?
Very happy, yep.
Thank you, and thank you for raising it, Adrian. Any other questions or comments for me? If not, can we move on then to item 7, the Chief Executive's report? Kim.
Thank you, David. So delighted today to present my first acting chief exec report, and as you can see, it's quite jam-packed with news. So I'll take it as read, but I'll go through some of the important key lines in here today. So I've had a busy 2 weeks, and it's been delightful getting out and about and meeting our teams. So on my first day, I was really privileged to attend the House of Commons Health Select Committee, and they'd come down to Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly to have a look at how are we going to use collectively our estates, especially NHS estates, as we do that shift to neighbourhood care. And we got very, very positive feedback from members of the committee that came. It's really important that we took the opportunity when they visited West Cornwall for the teams to showcase as well how we are taking the opportunity to look at new ways of providing urgent and emergency care closer to people's home. And really a warm congratulations to the team down there who really showcased what we are doing, both as RCHT and as a collective team. And of course, we didn't waste the opportunity to show members our new West Cornwall outpatients facility, which they really enjoyed looking around. Most importantly, I'd like to thank all of our teams out there who have warmly welcomed me as I've been out and about. And I'm really, really clear, and as a board, we have stated our intention that our culture, that means our people, our staff, and our leadership across the board is what we are concentrating on to make sure that our staff feel valued and safe to come to work, and most importantly, are able to give good patient care. I know I know a few of you have been tad surprised to see me, and whether I'm on my own or whether with other colleagues, it's been really great. It's not complicated. I'm just asking two questions. What are you most proud of? What are you least proud of? And I'm really, really not surprised to hear that everyone is so proud of the team that they work with. My challenge to us all is, if we're all proud of our team, how do we come together as a bigger team and be proud of us all here at RCHT? So when you next see me, know that I might be asking that question as well. Again, you're more than welcome to invite me, or I'm just serving notice. I might pop up in your department or a place near you soon. And that's really important, as we are committed to hearing, and we've already heard from Mr. Clifton. We're absolutely determined to hear your voices and act on it. I was really privileged to be at the opening of the two linear accelerators, or LINACs as they're known. Money has been generously funded and donated from RCHT Charity, the Sunrise Appeal, and of course NHS England Central Radiotherapy Replacement Funding. And it's no mean feat that the second one was opened a year early. If you ever had to realise the impact, Peter, who was an active recipient of the current treatment, opened the two LINACs with both myself and Suva, who's the head of radiotherapy physics. And I don't think anyone was left unmoved as regards the impact this treatment had had on him and his family. And thank you very much, Peter, to bring your story to life and what it means to be able to have that treatment. Flo, you can see that I have covered it quite in detail, some of the operational challenges we face, but I'll leave it there because I know Robin's going to cover much of this in his report. The only thing I will say is we are looking at refreshing our clinical vision for Flo, and we remain committed in eradicating corridor care. We've all agreed it is an unacceptable experience for both our patients and our staff. Our planning position, we've submitted our final plan in February this year, and that includes our financial, operational, and our workforce, as well as our board assurance assessment. We're awaiting final confirmation of the approval, and this will come to a future board meeting, but it's important to note that. The I nearly said West Cornwall, sorry, the Women and Children's update and e-care update are covered later in our private board, but for e-care it's important to note, following our 60-day assessment, which looks at clinical, technical and operational risk assessments, we took the important step of pausing our June go-live date. And it's a strong testament to the strong leadership for this programme, the governance through the programme board, and we remain committed to have a fresh start date, and the team is working hard on that to ensure it's safe for our staff, our patients, and it's sustainable, and we'll update you as that moves forward. It would be really remiss of me if I didn't bring to our attention the industrial action of our resident doctors that took place over 6 days between the 7th and the 13th of April. And 34.35% of our junior doctors took part in that. It's really important to note everyone can make a decision, and we will continue to support those that choose to take industrial action or choose to remain in work. And the British Medical Association have just notified us that a ballot for consultants will open on Monday, the 11th of May, and we will watch that with interest. Michelle Bateman, who is the deputy CNO for NHS England, expressed an interest to come and visit us down in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly at the recent CNO event in London. And I'm really privileged to say that Bernie George and Ali Bartlett from CFT showed her around, and while she visited RCHT, she was very, very clear that she was very interested in the dual chief nursing officer role and how we'd collaborated together and the partnership working we're doing as we move to neighbourhood. And Ali and Bernie did a sterling job in showing her around, and I'm really, really proud on behalf of RCHT and CFT that our nursing midwives and AHP came together and really showcased what we're doing well. So thank you to the teams. Ending on a little hint of caution, we have had, as all trusts have had, the intent to increase the UK terror threat following recent events nationally. So we are now on a severe, which means that there is a substantial or likely attack, and we all need to remain vigilant. This is not to cause panic. We all need to remain vigilant. And I know members of the executive board are looking at ways to make sure that we are keeping our staff and patients safe while they're in our care and on our premises. And that includes ensuring that we're using our name badges correctly. We have the right to challenge anyone that we don't know who comes onto a unit or into the ward, and we have got the right security out of hours with locked down entrances or an ability to enter. So it's just really important that we note that. So thank you, Chair. I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much, Kim. Are there any comments or questions for Kim, please? We've got Adam Broom, Non-Executive Director.
Thank you, Kim. Thank you, David. Two questions, please. Page 4 of the report talks about the update from the Senior Information Responsible Officer and makes reference to a national requirement to have a data handling complaints process by the 19th of June. And given we've had some data handling challenges fairly recently, I'm just checking in on, is that done or is that going to be done by the 19th of June? That's the first question. I'm not sure. I'm conscious Alison's not here.
Yeah. We'll pick that up and have a look.
Great.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you. And then kind of a similar question, I guess, on there's a reference to the NHS overhauling clinical standards to reduce maternal deaths section on the final page of the document. Talks about new requirements set out by the NHS and gives us a link to the detail on that, which suggests that those requirements will be on a rolling basis to be implemented in full by March 27. And I'm just checking in how the board will be kept informed on progress against those, please.
We'll report it through the Chief Nursing Officers and Neonatal and Maternity Safety Report.
Thank you.
Adam?
Yeah, thank you.
Could we go then to Richard Kramer, Non-Executive Director, please, Richard?
Thanks, David. It's more of a comment rather than a question, because it was really great to hearing Kim's report at the start of her report back about how much time you're spending connecting with people. I think that's so important, because it's not just about having great leadership or strategy. It's about having the right culture that really fosters compassion, that we support staff and enable people to flourish. So I think this engagement is about building staff confidence, which is exactly what's needed now. So it would be great if you can come back to the board to update us around how people are feeling. Do they feel more proud? Are they feeling a sense of pride, a greater sense of pride in working for RCHT, and whether they feel more confident going forward?
I'll make sure I do that, Richard. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Very important point. And then John Foster, next Director.
Thank you. Yeah, two brief comments from me. Firstly, it was just to highlight the really wonderful news of the therapeutic apheresis service. It's a slight personal link for me, having benefited from that in the past. But I just thought that was another excellent bit of work to expand the range of care that's available to people in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly without having to travel, and the disruption that can cause into later treatment. So I thought that was really wonderful to read. And then secondly, on the resident doctor industrial action, I was with some of our teams in the hospital the day following that. And it was really clear that we'd managed that situation really well. It was great to see that reflected at system level. There was a lot less disruption than I think a lot of our colleagues were expecting coming in on shift that day, which was a really nice reflection. And I wanted to just give a brief mention to some of the support teams involved in making that happen. The rota coordinator team in particular were mentioned to me unprompted by 3 separate senior colleagues as having been instrumental in our response. I think if we could pass thanks on to them, that would be great, but clearly a huge team effort to get us through that.
Thank you. We'll pass on those thanks. It's important. Thank you.
Thank you, John, and thanks for getting out and about in the trust. Any other comments? If not, can we move on? Just looking around, I think we're able to move on. But thanks again for that report, Kim. So that takes us into section A, where we consider matters for discussion and decision as near as possible to the top of our agenda. And I'd like to turn to Robin Jones, Chief Operating Officer, for item 8 on urgent and emergency care. Robin.
Thank you, David. So whilst I appreciate the report is read, just for members of the public benefit, I'll draw out that our type 1, so for our performance, so that's the emergency department, not the whole system, for our performance improved to 51%, but want to acknowledge here that we don't see that as job done. We don't see that as finished. We are aspiring to recover to the constitutional standards of the 4-hour performance. Our whole system, so that's known as type 3 and type 1 performance, 79.6%. Which is much getting closer to the 95% constitutional standards, but above the 78% annual operating plan target for this moment in time. I think it's important for us to acknowledge that our average ambulance handovers have improved to 35 minutes. We have sat around this board table with considerably longer average handovers. However, it's important that we also acknowledge in the report the longest ambulance handovers. So we are still seeing challenges with some patients having exceptionally long handovers, and our longest was 485 minutes. And whilst that's 132 minutes better than the previous month, that is in no way near the standard that we expect to be delivering for our patients. And important we highlight here, colleagues. And the same to be said for our 12-hour performance. So whilst we've seen improvements in our 4-hour delivery, we are seeing the last month was 14.7% of patients arriving in the emergency department had a stay of 12 hours or more. We aspire to be less than 5% of patients, with the ambition to eradicate that. And on page 5 of the report, you'll see we've got a table that we initially labelled as our red lines, but we've been working with colleagues to think red lines isn't the best descriptor in the world. So we're changing that to being a description of our improvement goals. But in there, you'll see our ambitions in a staggered way to end the use or end long stays in the emergency department. We have introduced a very transparent reporting tool internally with regards to corridor care. So at a click of a button, all of our staff can see how many patients are in any of the corridor care spaces and how long they've been there. As part of we want to be very transparent. Where are we and where are our opportunities to improve that? That enables us to celebrate when we're not using those spaces, and it enables us to be really clear when and where we are using them. We are using them too much. We need to acknowledge that here. And all of the actions that are detailed in the report are intended to be our ambition to end the use of corridor care. And that ending of the use of corridor care must not result in a worsening of the gains that we've made from an ambulance handover perspective, because at the same time, we need to end patients having an ambulance handover greater than 45 minutes and reinstate the delivery of the 15 minutes. I will draw colleagues' attention to section 3.5 specifically, which is where myself, Bernie and Mary have sat together and worked through a set of actions that we will individually lead over and above the wider trust actions for ending corridor care and supporting urgent care performance. And the appendix that you've got is from Getting It Right First Time, GIRFT. GIRFT make a set of clinical operational standards that are well regarded as delivering these standards is a key route to delivering your urgent care performance. Myself, Bernie and Mary are leading roadshows across the organisation with our clinical leaders to explain the importance of them, how we want people to work with them. But from a cultural perspective, we're also talking to all of our teams to say, if we're not delivering the standard, let's say it. And if it gets raised to you, your response needs to start with thank you, and the second part of your response needs to be how can I help? And further enhancing that, our comms teams are using some of the materials that are provided by GIRFT. So we will be placing posters up through the hospital. So not just staff, but also patients and their relatives can click a QR code and feed back to us, these standards are not being met here. And we want to hear that because we want to then be able to do the thank you, how can we help, how can we fix it? When we've been and spoken to organisations that have got these standards working well, they don't have complicated reporting mechanisms. It is the way they work. So it's really important for us to move into that space of we will work in this way. And that's why we're encouraging that. Say it if it's not happening, and how we respond to that it is key critical. The report lists a range of other actions, but David and colleagues, I think that's a really important factor for us to take into consideration here. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Robin. There's a huge amount of work going on, I know, and I'm very grateful to you for being so transparent, because of course that helps the public and the board to have assurance that even though there's still a road to travel, we're making progress. Are there any comments or questions for Robin? Kim, I know this is very close to your heart. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add, but it's not compulsory, but just in case you did.
I think we've been really clear. So with the new divisional structure, so for members of the general public, as you've heard us speak about, we've gone from 7 care groups to 4 divisions, and we've now got what we call an executive leadership team that invites the chairs, the clinical chairs of the 4 divisions. We're really clear that their voices are instrumental in changing this. They lead it from the front every day. And if there's any of the actions they don't agree with, or we need to have a further discussion on, their voice is welcome. In fact, it's pivotal. We need to make sure that the actions we're taking are having impact, and we recognise how hard everybody is working, but we're not always getting the impact that we require, and we're just going back round. So the road shows, I'll call them road shows, that Robin, Bernie and Mary are doing is going out. I know they were at St Michael's yesterday, they did RCHT a few days ago, is getting those clinicians and operational colleagues in the room to have those discussions. What we don't want is everybody working hard for little or no impact. And the gains we have to make this year cannot be marginal. That they need to be absolutely transformational, and they need to be able to deliver good patient care, and for us to be able to come out of corridor care sustainably, safely, and do the service redesign we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. That's all extremely clear. First of all, we've got Ian Dean, Chief Finance Officer.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Robin, for the report. I think it's a really detailed report, lots of really useful assurance in there. The bit you talked about the table on page 5, and I'm pleased that we're reconsidering the red lines description of that. I think for me, there's something about how do we, some of those dates were by the end of March, we've achieved some of them, but not all of them. And recognising they're stretching and ambitious, we've got a number there that are by the end of May. So I guess I wanted to test our level of confidence on those. But also, how are we going to celebrate? How are we going to get that balance through this report of celebrating the progress we are making, but also the discussion we have to have where we're not making that progress? And you know, over 12 hours, as you've already alluded to, is a really good example where we're not where we want to be, and we've had that position for, I think, our last 3 probably public board meetings where we've been at that between kind of 15 and 20%. So it'd be good just to think about how I think we use that, because we've made really good progress on places like West Cornwall performance. So there are some real celebration of some successes in there, to Adrian's point, as well as the challenges that we continue to have.
Thank you. So we met as a project team yesterday to work through, in particular, focus of the conversation was our communication. So we spoke around the board about reinstating a regular update to board colleagues. We're actually going to do an all-user communication, so not just to the board, but to the whole hospital, of how we're progressing with these improvement goals. We have a dashboard that shows us progress, but we want to be able to show everybody in an easier way than that dashboard. This is how we're delivering that. We want to bring into that some patient stories and some staff stories to make this very real. Those staff stories on some occasions will be staff stories from where it's not been working, because we need to talk through that openly too, as well as the staff stories of celebrating, actually, this has been delivered, this is working well. It's really important to us that we balance that message. We need to acknowledge that for some of our colleagues, where they're in one of those areas, take the 12-hour ED waits, that's really challenging for our clinical colleagues in that area. And we want to be able to show that we see that and we share that to the organisation. It ties in with Kim's approach to the walkarounds that Kim's doing, so that the comms we're writing will be then headed by Kim, so that it will be very clear. So chief executive messaging out to our organisation, what are we doing, how are we doing against it, and where are some real life stories that people can connect to. Because in answer to your question, we need to make this real for ourselves. And when I say ourselves, I mean everybody who works in the organisation, because we can all contribute to those very ambitious standards that we've set ourselves.
Isabel and then Richard.
Thank you. And firstly, a comment. I'm so pleased at the collaboration that's going on at leadership level. So it's bringing together Chief Medical Officer Mary, yourself, Robin, and also Bernie, in terms of the nursing leadership, to look at this in the round and come up with solutions that go beyond perhaps the portfolio of one of you. So I think that's the first thing to say, is that's for me, that's really important. The second thing, coming back to the 12 hours, and I think Ian's already highlighted it, and it occurred to me that I'm not sure what it must be like to be a patient who is one of those 12-hour waits. I'm wondering whether there is some merit in actually doing, as you're suggesting, some stories around that, not just from the staff perspective, but from the patient perspective. Because what I'd like to know more about is, what are we doing to care for those patients whilst they're in that 12-hour wait? Because we can look at the stats and we can say, 16% or whatever the percentage is of 12-hour waits. And clearly we are an outlier nationally around our 12-hour waits. So I would be expecting to come to the Quality Committee with some really thought out actions around what we can do to improve that position. But I think also it's worth, really focusing in on the qualitative side of this and saying, how can we make life better, even if you are waiting for 12 hours? What are we offering? How are we supporting both their patients and also their families during that 12 hours? Thank you.
Then could we go to Richard, then Bernie? Richard, then Becky, and then Bernie, in that order. Richard.
My questions are very similar to Ian and Isabel, so I'll be much quicker. First of all, I found the report to be really clear and honest and open. And also, I came away thinking there's a real grip on these performance issues with getting it right first time, got it right, and walkarounds and dashboards and so on. So I was really assured by that. The data question, I think Ian's covered in part. I just wanted to be clear how we're doing in terms of eradicating 24-hour department stay and where we are in terms of the length of time people are on ED corridors, because we talked about 2-hour maximum on that page 5 of the report. And you have talked a lot in your report and a follow-up about staff stories. I think that's really, really important in terms of how staff feeling, in terms of bringing their ideas to the table about their well-being and so on. And perhaps that could also be reflected in future reports, because I think they're really powerful if they come across in the board report. Thanks.
We are still challenged with patients having 24-hour or longer stays in our emergency department. We are having days where no patients are over 24 hours, and we are making sure that we're highlighting that in that piece, Ian commenting about when do we celebrate. So we are sharing that with our colleagues. We are able to see in real time if a patient goes over the 24-hour marker. And in the dashboard that we've created, you can see how many patients have been over 24 hours each day. We split that between pure physical health patients and mental health patients, not because there's a difference between the patients, but because there's a different response needed to support that. What I will acknowledge is that in the main, over 24-hour stays now are patients with health needs. Previously, it was patients with mental health needs. So we've seen some really good improvements for our mental health cohort of patients, and our next space to eradicate 24-hour stays is now into the physical health patients. And our main route to that is the work that we mentioned in the report through our acute medical model and how our acute medical unit, AMU, functions, because it's the turnover that they create that is the speed of patients leaving the emergency department who need admitting.
Could we go to Becky, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Robin, and all of the staff who are working incredibly hard to address this issue. Thinking about the back end of the pathway to allow beds for patients to move from corridor to or ED to wards, and thinking about discharges, I think there are some opportunities to both identify complex patients who require quite significant amounts of discharge planning, and then increased communication with primary care and perhaps use of voluntary sector to enable that. So I was just wondering what work is going on for that and what assurance do we have of that moving forward?
Great question, Becky. So we do actually have some of our partners work embedded within our team. They've got desks in our clinical site office. We've got a colleague coming on site every Thursday from one of the integrated neighbourhood teams, and we're just organising her little things, but they matter. We're organising for her to have an ID badge so that she can easily navigate her way around our hospital without having to knock on doors to get in. She can swipe her way in. In that, we've got networks through what we call our bronze call and our silver calls, where system partners all come together, and that includes voluntary sector to review our opportunity for discharge. And we're undertaking a piece of work at the moment to be better at identifying early in a patient's pathway where they may need care from another provider, voluntary sector or health or social care, so we can make those referrals early, so that then people can start working on that exit plan for that patient rather than wait till the patient's fit, which then just causes a further delay. There's more opportunity for us in that space. We've agreed at a whole system level that there'll be an exit timely handover protocol target, 1 day for pathway 1, 2 days for pathway 2, and 4 days for pathway 3. And working together to achieve that will drive the right behaviours, because actually there's that piece around sharing information early with primary care to say, actually, we have these patients in our beds. What's your knowledge of these patients? How can we work together? What's their overarching understanding of their patient's care at home and their patient's home circumstances? And we're beginning to see more linkages by, like the team that are on site today, actually at the end of bed talking to patients saying, actually, I know your family circumstances. We can get you home without needing to wait for X, Y, and Z. We can cover that whilst X, Y, and Z gets provided for you. But happy, Becky, that we can organise for you to come and have a little wander around and see the teams as part of your induction.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much.
Betty, did you have your hand up?
I did, but Mary put a response in the chat. The only thing that I would add to that is, yes, we'll pick up a board story in terms of a 12-hour wait. And then just linking back to the cultural piece, I think the roadshows are really important in terms of getting every piece of the organisation to understand what their unique contribution can be if we consistently did X, Y, and Z. And yesterday, picking up Kim's point around the divisional structure, we had a senior member of the team say actually he'd never seen corridor care beyond the ED and went and visited it for the first time, and actually then really felt different as a consequence in terms of actually in his leadership role what he could do within his division to kind of influence that agenda. So I think that's the bit that we're trying to do in terms of the roadshows and the ongoing conversations or generating the comms plan, that this is all of us and we have a role to play, but it strongly links back in terms of our culture.
Thank you, Bernie. Ray, I think you wanted to come in.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Robin, I was wondering if I remembered correctly that there was a trial some years ago at West Cornwall Hospital of Vol sector partners being actively involved in ward rounds, but is there, I don't know if I remember that right, but there surely must be more that we can do about having a regular presence of Vol sector partners, not just for people who are waiting particularly long, but making it a sort of, you know, by default a part of the process, and having those conversations about, you know, why are you here in the first place, and was there something else that we could have done, and how we can get you home quicker. I can't remember exactly what the outcome of that was, but I feel like there's more that we can do.
I absolutely agree, Ray, that we can do so much more to harness the power of our voluntary sector function, and the way that that can support families and patients in their overall care needs, and actually can be a really big part of patients not coming in the first instance. And how we often say the best bed is your own bed, and how we can embrace that. And I think actually, Ray, because we often give a walk around to non-exec colleagues when they start, let's get one booked in with you and I'll tie you into our team that's part of that, because the network you'll bring will be really powerful in some of the work that we've already started.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I think we're already seeing the benefit of having you and Becky on the board, so thank you both. There are two more people, I think, waiting to speak, Kim and Brian. Unless there are any other contributions, I think we probably need to move on after that, if that's okay. So first of all, could I go to you, Kim?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note we've been told we've got the right process, and I'll call it ingredients. So it's not to confuse staff who are working really, really hard by introducing yet another thing. Actually, it is about going back round what we said our clinical vision for flow is, and I think that's what Mary, Bernie and Robin are doing. It's having the executive leadership team meeting that I referred to as a safe space, where, as Bernie has said, people feel free to be able to say they don't understand something. And we've already heard that with the new national operating framework, as well as some of the improvement works we're doing, as well as the new Get It Right First Time standards that are out for operational, for outpatients transformation, the new quality, we are going to hold a session for the wider senior leadership teams that explains some of this. If you don't work with it every day, you don't recognise what they are, and they all interrelate, and they're all about having good patient care and good staff experience. So we're going to hold that session, and I think that's really important that people have said, please can we go back round that, which we'll do, because that further embeds it as everyday practice, not something that's done unto, which I think is really important. Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add that the work that Robin and the teams are doing, the breadth of the work extends beyond urgent flow and corridor care, and impacts areas of safety and evacuation. And we do on occasions have patients asking us questions and queries to our care teams about where they're being located in certain locations across the hospital is impacting the safety and the evacuation. So again, it's not particularly picked up in the report, but again, the breadth of this work is far more ranging than what's just captured in here. And there's a lot of activity and a lot of proactive work going on across the teams to ensure that we are also doing all of this in a safe way and in a safe environment for our patients and our staff.
I was pleased you mentioned that, because one of the issues we don't discuss much is the physical environment of the emergency department, and whether it's just too small, with not enough bays or whatever. And that's something I know you've got under advisement, Robin, to see if we can find some capital investment to improve the facilities for patients and staff. Thank you. So I think that was a rich discussion.
Great conversation.
Very helpful. If I go back to the regional summit a couple of weeks ago, which Kim and I attended, which was attended also by Sir Jim Mackey, Chief Executive of the NHS, there was quite a bit of focus on urgent and emergency care. And as I mentioned in my report, there was an interesting analysis from the ICB, the Integrated Care Board, which includes Gloucestershire, an analysis of where all the patients in the hospital were coming from. And that showed that 60% of the beds were occupied by 3% of people who were frail with a lot of comorbidity. I don't know if our ICB has done the analysis, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was quite similar here. So that's quite interesting in the context of what Isabel was saying about, each patient is an individual and what's their experience. So I don't think I can summarise all of the rich discussion, but I'm sure the Company Secretary has captured the key points which we ought to record about staff experience, patient experience, working with primary care, working with voluntary sector, and so on, as well as the new dashboard you're producing for all staff, Robin, as well as for the board, and the weekly management statistics now that we get from the NHS, which are confidential to the NHS, but which I'm sending each week to the board. So we've got quite a rich data set and quite a rich contribution from the board for you to perhaps take away and consider, Robin, with Kim, in terms of next steps. Well, thank you for that. Are you happy with that, Robin?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So, for good reason, because we needed to discuss those issues. With your permission, Paul, could I suggest that we now go to the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian Annual Report, item 10, because Joe Burton is with us, and I wouldn't want to waste Joe's time, if that's okay. So, Joe, if you're ready, could we go to your report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Take the report as read, but I would just like to highlight some points within it. So firstly, I think really positive that freedom to speak up is happening and functioning as intended across all three of our hospital sites. And also really positive that we now have a deputy Freedom to Speak Up Guardian who is busy getting out and about across all the sites and meeting colleagues and promoting the service. I think what we often see in the Freedom to Speak Up cases is a reflection of what isn't perhaps getting resolved at our local team level. But our growing, increasingly growing actually champion network, we're nearly at 100, are really helping to have conversations with colleagues in a supportive environment. And they're also helping to really promote the service. And of course, delighted that that now includes 5 medical colleagues, which is really positive. It does feel to me that staff confidence in speaking up is fragile. And we, I know that because of our increasing numbers of anonymous cases, although that is less than last time I came to board. And we did see 6 of those cases convert to a confidential conversation. So that is positive. I'm looking forward with our new culture work to an increased and kind of stronger emphasis on encouraging conversations within our divisions before they perhaps get to a more complex level where we really do need to kind of involve our employee relations colleagues and go into more kind of formal processes. I could go on, but I think that's my little summary. So I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. I know I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but certainly since I've been here, I've tried to take every opportunity in public board, in podcasts that I do with the comms team after each board meeting, and in my visits and conversations with staff to say I can't emphasise more how important it is for staff, regardless of status and standing, to be free to speak up and speak out if they see anything inappropriate. And I think all I can do is keep repeating that message, which I know is endorsed unanimously by the board. And staff have nothing at all to fear from speaking up and speaking out. They really don't. And we're not sort of the organisation who would put the trust reputation before putting right things that are wrong and encouraging staff to speak out. Because otherwise, if people don't feel free to speak out, how can we be safe? So I can only repeat that, and I'm sorry if I'm like a broken record on it, but it doesn't seem to be getting traction, so I just have to keep repeating it. Steve Williamson, more importantly, used to say it over and over again as well. I'd like to give Kim, if she wants to, the opportunity to say it as well. I don't know what more we can do as Chair and Chief Executive to emphasise the point, but if you've got any suggestions or ideas, we're more than happy to do anything that you would like us to do to encourage people to speak up and speak out. I remember when I was on the board of Torbay, I spoke to Robert Francis about this and discussed it with him before he produced his report on mid-staffs. So, you know, I really am committed to freedom to speak up and can only repeat my commitment to the agenda. But it's far more important for staff to know what the Chief Executive thinks, so I'll pass to her.
I think from what you know, I've just recently given up and passed the exec portfolio over to our acting chief nursing officer. We all know what we hear from staff is not what we believe our experience is and should be, and I think we have to visibly role model that ability to be able to confidently speak up and know there'll be no reprisal. And I think, you know, Joe, yourself and David are going round to the new divisions and meeting the new senior leadership teams. We've got to promote a culture as close to the person's working place, in the working place, that allows them to have that initial conversation. Often, we know that by the time you've reached out either to yourself or one of the executive or even non-executive, people have already suffered detriment, if not from others, from themselves, feeling psychologically unsafe. So we have to get that message out. And I think the rounds that you and David are doing will further demonstrate that. We know the areas where we've had the clusters of freedom to speak up. Those are the areas we need to get more aligned to. And part of us being out and about, I don't think is a bad thing to ask. Would you speak up and out? Because you get to the actions that we all need to take to be able to promote that. But I would like to say to anyone listening, if you have a concern, please speak up. We absolutely would not tolerate any detriment or retribution, and it's important that you feel safe when you come to work. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Just to add one sentence, every consultant interview I chair, Joe, I do ask the candidates if they are willing to be challenged by people at any level. And you know, so far they've always said, yes, they are open to that challenge. So I hope that is the case, you know, for the successful appointees, but that all our consultants feel open to challenge. So we've got a number of people who want to speak. The first physical hand was Ian, so I'll take Ian first.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, John. Nice to see you again. So I think it's really positive that there's extra resource that you've alluded to in terms of the support for you and the work you've been doing. So that's really positive to hear. In section 8 of the report, the medical and dental not having any reported was a real concern. And I really welcome the fact we've got those 5 champions, including our chief resident doctor. I guess my question for board would just be, once we've got their insight into, is that there's another route, or that they feel comfortable, or is it an under-reporting? Because at the moment, I don't feel that we can be confident either way. So really welcome them being on board. And I think we just need to, at some point in your report, think about how we get their insight into that, so we better understand whether it is that they've got routes that they're happy with, or whether there's more we need to do in that area.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. Just to respond to that, so we are actually doing some specific communications through the medical education team to let them specifically know about those champions, but also more widely in the trust as well. So yeah, I hope to see those numbers rising. Yeah, thank you.
So could we go next, please, to Richard?
Yeah, thank you. First and foremost, I'm always pleased to be the NED lead and support for Jo in her role. It's a real honour to do so, and I learn a lot about the organisation. I just want to come back to the points raised by Kim and David around lived experience and what you think, Jo, we should be doing, so staff feel it's better to speak up than be silent. And it's not so much thinking about process or policy as what they feel or see, so they feel more confident and psychologically safe. And what would it look like in 6 months' time so people feel that way? And also, slightly differently, we've had this discussion before, but are guardians being drawn into HR processes in a way that might risk confusion both for you and for staff raising concerns?
Thanks, Richard. So on the first point, what I've started to do is have conversations with the new divisions about how they can really embrace speaking up. And not, even before we have an issue or a concern to even raise, what does the culture look like in our departments, in our groups? Are staff being asked how they are in the morning? Are we having those basic conversations? So I guess it goes back to our culture work, but those are some of the conversations I'm going to be having with our divisions, as well as, I think our division should be telling their own speak up stories, so that people get used to actually speaking up is something we're curious about at RCHT, and can lead to positive impact and change, and obviously positive impact in terms of patients and how staff feel at work. And then the second part of the question, are guardians being drawn into HR kind of processes? I would say no, absolutely not. We're really clear as guardians that we do not get involved with formal processes. But that said, it is still advised that we can support people alongside those processes. And often what I've seen over the last 7 years is that our people partners and our assistant people partners would struggle to give that support sometimes in terms of kind of their workload. So sometimes when people come to me and then they end up needing to go through a formal process, I will kind of walk alongside that process with them, but I wouldn't go to grievance meetings, for example, or anything like that, but I would offer that support, and that is right and proper in terms of the National Guardian's Office guidance. I hope that answers the question.
On the first point, Chair, and I think you've made it, but when we talk about freedom to speak up, it's good to have trust communications about it, but really, as you say, it needs to come from the manager. The manager needs to say to all their team members that raising concerns is expected, is valued, and we support that. That managers actively listen to their staff, that staff can be supported when they're unsure about the process, and we give feedback and close that loop. And I think if we can get that right and empower teams, and this is through the staff survey work, I think that will really complement the work that you do.
Thank you, Richard. We're going to have to keep an eye on the clock because we've got another colleague waiting to come in. So I've got Ella, Chief Strategy Officer. Paul wanted to come in. We've got Robin Jones and Isabel. Did you?
No,
want
that's
to?
okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
You're welcome to come in. So could we go to Ella Stracy, Chief Strategy Officer first, please?
Thank you. I just wanted to add that assurance really that we are linking in with Jo on the culture work, as she's mentioned. So I'll be meeting regularly with Jo in order that I get some of the kind of soft intelligence that she has around how that's going down and where we need to do better. I think also really important that link, as Richard's just said there, we need to support all our leaders to kind of normalise this, to say in an organisation such as ours with a culture that we want to create, we expect people to bring forward their concerns and we expect our leaders to receive that with a thank you and here's what I'm going to do about it. That will need some training and support for some people because that's a different way of leading, but we absolutely intend to embed that in the culture approach we're taking.
Paul.
I was going to make a couple of comments. One, Ella's picked up around the link with culture and we'll certainly link that to the staff survey paper, which is coming through in a moment. But the main point I wanted to make was just building what Richard said around the linkages and the crossover sometimes into HR processes. And Jo and I meet with the team regularly, but I think we manage that really well. I think there's something about the wider piece of staff feeling safe at work, and that's broader than just the HR processes. So I think it's really critical that supporting what Kim and David said about all staff being able to speak up, and that's to anybody, including the Freedom to Speak Up team, but equally your voice will be heard. And Jo and I and members of my team meet regularly in an environment where we're sharing themes, issues that come and go, trying to look at cases and learning also. But there's a really strong bond developed there between the teams of respecting our professional boundaries. So I just wanted to assure the board and members of the public that does take place very regularly. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Very helpful. And then the final comment, if the board is content, from Robin.
Aligned to Ella's point. Jo, I think it would do well for you and I to have a quick touch point. And we've been doing some work with the divisions when we presented here about the divisions being our new powerhouse. And we're working with them on how their agendas will work to enable them to be those powerhouses and how they can shape themselves to get that split around delivery and assurance mechanisms. So, Jo, I think in those sessions we're having with those divisional leadership teams, we can dedicate some time with you on how that will tie together because we're in a building phase. We can link all of that in, and for me, it's not me telling them what to do or you telling them what to do. It's enabling them to have access to the conversation with you that I can help facilitate.
Brilliant, thank you.
Okay, so again, another rich discussion, I thought. The company secretary will work her magic on the wording, but I wonder whether we ought to do a bit more than, receive and note the report, and perhaps, have a clear statement in our minutes about, if we are unanimous, the unanimous support of the board for staff to feel free to speak up and speak out. And for some reason, clearly, our board's message isn't getting across. We need to find a way, I think, Kim, of cascading it to all staff. And perhaps for many staff, it's not really what the board thinks, it's what their manager thinks or what their team thinks or the people working around them think, and how they feel they would be received if they spoke up. So, they might think it's fine and dandy for the board to say it, but they might be thinking, well, I'm not sure how my immediate supervisor would receive it. So the comments that have been made about teams and managers and how we all work together to develop managers to have the time and space to receive staff speaking up in a supportive way. It's all of that which has been in the discussion. Lindsay, I think if you could find a way of capturing and recording our thanks and support for everything that Jo and David, her deputy, do, but also I think emphasising the very strong support of the board to all staff who speak up and speak out. Does that make sense? Board content with that? Okay, thank you very much. So again, with apologies to you, Paul, if we could go now to Sarah Coulter, who I think will be there waiting to present the Guardian of Safe Working Hours annual report. Like freedom to speak up, this is a mandatory requirement for boards to receive. So Sarah, I hope you're there. I can't see you at the moment, but if you are there, could you introduce your report, please?
I first of all just check people can hear me. Okay.
I can't hear you, Sarah.
She's really quiet. People hear me now?
That's excellent. We could just hear you now, Sarah. Could you start again? I'm sorry.
No, I didn't start. I did want to check you could hear me due to problems I've had in the past, so apologies about that. And also apologies for missing Q3 report as well. This was due to staffing pressures within respiratory. So the main focus of this past year really has been kind of the preparation and then the introduction of the exception reporting process, which came into play in early February of this year. I've summarised the changes in the report, so I don't plan to go over them, but happy to discuss as necessary. I'm seeing some concerned faces. Can people hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Sorry. So the main change from my side and the resident doctors really has been the removal of the clinical supervision to sign off the report. This is now predominantly done by the HR team. There is, just to reassure everyone, there's still the oversight and the governance with this, as explained in the report. And we, as I suppose, imagine most trusts are doing, are still auditing the figures as well. This is not trying to catch the doctors out. This is just trying to reassure everyone that the money has been spent appropriately. We found the transition went really quite straightforward, and that really was thanks to the hard work of the HR team involved in this. So I did want to extend my thanks to them because they made it as streamlined as we possibly could have done. The past year, there have been 3 areas of concern. I am hoping that all 3 areas have been tidied up at the end of the year, however. So the respiratory team, who were a huge outlier in exception reporting, now have an extra doctor, and this came into play at the beginning of April. And the other areas were oncology and cardiology, who their problems were sorted quite a lot sooner, to be fair. There are a lot of issues that pop up throughout the year that I generally don't bring to any of these reports because they're sorted quite quickly, just with kind of discussion with the departments. You've noticed that fines have reappeared in the reports again, and that's because with the new exception reporting process, it's a lot easier for them to highlight the fines. So this is probably something that's going to feature more heavily in the future that I just will need to keep an eye on. Reassuringly, there are no immediate safety concerns. Post-shift accommodation, we now have very well established how the doctors can access this. And I was just hoping for an update regarding the Trelawney rest facilities as well. It's gone a little bit quiet on that one. As you're aware, we had the tower introduced last year, but we're still waiting for somewhere in Trelawney. So just a quick update from me, but obviously happy to answer any questions.
Very much, Sarah. Thank you for all you do as well as Guardian of Safe Working Hours. And I apologise if we kept you waiting. Would anyone like to pick up Sarah's queries? Mary?
I can comment in that, Sarah, this week as well, I think, I don't know whether it was you that was involved in the email trail, but there is an email trail that I'm still actively pursuing around the potential of that outpatient area for the rest facilities. So I've been on it this week, and we'll see if we can get some clarity around that.
Amazing, thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Any other comments or questions for Sarah, please? Your report is always so clear and comprehensive that it might not generate too many questions, but we've got 4. The hands have just popped up. So first of all, we're going to Uzma Bozai. Uzma.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the report, Sarah. I just had a question about whether at the trust we use any kind of fatigue modelling when we're looking at rotors. I know it's something that's done in other industries, and I've noticed that some other trusts in the southwest are doing fatigue work. So it was just something that'd been on my mind.
Interesting. We don't, but I'd be really keen to be put in touch with other trusts that do actually. If you wouldn't, yeah.
Yes, I'll make some. I'll find the kind of articles that I'd read and forward them on to you and see if I can make some intros.
Thank you.
And now we go to Aled. Wait, John? I beg your pardon, John. John, that's fine. No, you've come up as number one now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Sarah. I think firstly it was great to hear that so many issues are being resolved promptly without it needing to sort of come up to this level. That's always really good to hear. A question, my interest really, I was wondering if we ever look at our statistics on this through an equalities lens at all to see whether there's any kind of disproportionate or differing impacts of sort of breaches of safe working hours on workforce from an equalities perspective, different equality strands in there. I'm not sure if that's something we look at or could. Might be more of an HR question for colleagues, but.
Yeah, I certainly haven't been. It's certainly something we can take to the HR team now. They are a bit more involved in it. Yeah, like I said, they've been pretty phenomenal actually with the work that they have done with this.
Paul, anything you'd like to add?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Sarah. I think that's something we can certainly strengthen. Our systems do naturally show red flags if rotas are non-compliant, but both from a safety and a working perspective. So we can use that data. And there is something about triangulating data with patient outcomes as well, which we do that. But I think there's something, I like the closer working, thank you, that you talked about with HRs. I think that gives an extra lens to look at that issue. So I think that's something I'll take away, and we'll feed that back to the HR team and we'll pick that up. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I think it's you, Alice.
Yes, thank you. I was just reflecting on industrial action, the BMA's resident doctors industrial action, and the fact that doesn't seem to have impacted on these numbers at all. I mean, have you got any reflections on that, Sarah, at all?
Good question. I mean, I might need more time to answer that question, actually. It's a very good question, and it's probably worth having a bit of an audit, the actual dates as well regarding them. What often happens with the industrial action is that you don't necessarily get the exception reports, but the locums do claim extra hours, and that's something that I don't capture with any of my data, but I do know that happens because they come to me asking for the extra hours, and I have to explain that's not to do with me. But yeah, we can certainly get a bit more data on that, but I think it's probably not going to be the doctors in training. It's going to be the locums that are claiming the extra hours those days instead. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I don't know if Paul or Mary would want to comment. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. So we found, I guess because we've been in this situation so many times, part of the byproduct of that is we've got better at managing the situation. So we found cover and a battle rhythm, if you like, for managing industrial action. So anecdotally, nationally, there's been less impact each time industrial actions happen detrimentally due to the fact that we've got better at dealing with and planning ahead. So that's probably a position we wouldn't, is a byproduct of the situation. We'd rather not be in the situation, of course, but I think that's anecdotally, certainly through my national network, that trusts are experiencing, and it's the same with us.
Anything to add, Mary?
No, I would agree. And in actual fact, RCHT has a percentage of eligible doctors to strike lower than our neighbouring trusts across the peninsula. So we last time only had, I think on the peak day, it was 30% of eligible doctors, which meant cover was mainly able to be maintained within the resident doctor staffing base. We haven't specifically looked at the additional hours claimed, and my suspicion is that might be slightly confounded data.
I probably can't add to this as guardian of safe working, but as a consultant, it feels we are better staffed on the strike days.
Thanks,
I would agree, Sarah.
Could we come to a final comment now, please, from Adam Broom, our Executive Director?
Yeah, thank you as always for the report, Sarah. You mentioned this in what you gave us as a verbal update, the immediate safety concerns. There's a graph on page 7 of your paper, which shows the trend over years in immediate safety concerns. And you mentioned, which is really great to hear, that there were no, as I understand it, no immediate safety concerns for 25-26, which is great to hear. But what can we do to maintain that? Because the trend is quite up and down over years.
I think a lot of it is the staffing. Even the ones that are declared are usually down to inadequate staffing and support as well. So it's making sure that there is the senior support available to the resident doctors. That often is where we have fallen down in the past. I mean, I think we've been quite lucky. Our numbers have always been quite low in this. Yes, we've had quite a lot declared, but very few of them do meet the criteria.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I think we're going to need to move on, if the board's content. Could I thank you very much for your report, Sarah, and for all the work you do on being the guardian of safe working hours, and for an excellent report. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you again soon. So could we then receive a note, the annual report from the Guardian of Safe Working Hours, please? And just circling back to the previous item, Lindsay, Company Secretary, has put a resolution in the chat, which has got 9 likes. So I think that's accepted. So thank you for that, Lindsay. What I suggest we do then is to go back to the staff survey outcomes, which would complete section A, then take a break, and then come back with renewed vigour for the second half of the agenda. That's okay? So item 9, staff survey outcomes and action plan. Could I ask you to introduce this, please, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. So everyone in your pack, you'll have the paper, the staff survey results and engagement approach for 2025. As you will know, for members of the public, nationally, all trusts and partake in the staff survey. It's a standard document with the same questions for all staff members. That takes place towards the latter end of the year, so last year, October to sort of November time. And then there's a bit of a time lag while nationally all the statistics are put together and the trust gets the results early in the year. So there's a little bit of a time lag. And so the staff survey was undertaken last October. For us, that was a period of significant organisational change, and I think that is reflected in some of the feedback we've had. But having said that, there is a repeated pattern of areas of concern that I just want to bring to board and public's attention and talk about some of the things we're going to do to start to address that. Generally speaking, the staff survey did have a set of disappointing results. I think I need to accept that and make that point, mainly around most of the measures around staff experience, and particularly around recommending the trust as a place to receive care and work in. A couple of anomalies on that. Bank colleagues reported more positive experiences, which is really good. We've tried to work harder to equalise the feeling of working on the bank, as well as being standard member of staff. They're critical to our safety. And also, ethnic minority staff reported a slight improvement in their experience, although I would say that's still below the standard we would expect. Having said that, and just linking back to Joe's bit, there's still concerns around raising concerns, and we've talked about that, so I won't do anything more on that. And a couple of areas that continue to be a problem for us. One is around appraisal uptake, and we might come on to that at different times, but that's something that's completely within our gift. Admittedly, it's challenging sometimes for busy operational teams to find that space, but it's a really critical touch point with staff, and staff do say they do want an appraisal, and there's something that the board, and particularly the People and Culture Committee, led by Richard, have been focusing on over the past few months. The one area that's showed marked decline is appraisal compared to our similar organisations, I should say, so it's more pertinent to RCHT. But what some areas that hold up fairly well is staff's feeling of well-being from teamwork, particularly, although that has declined slightly. And that's something that I think we ought to recognise, that staff get a lot of support in teams, which is really important. And then again, we remain an outlier nationally on unwanted sexual behaviour, and that report has declined as well again. So that's a particular area of concern for the trust and particular area of focus. And again, a lot of this is triangulated and strong links with the work that Ella's doing with some of my team around the cultural approach. It's something we want to recognise going forward. So in terms of how we take this forward, recognising the welcome improvement in the trust performance matrices, and particularly around the time and depth and space that's now given to the people agenda. There's work we are going to start to do with the divisions, and we talked a lot about line management, the line manager experience and staff relationship, and that is critical. So something we want to do about improving leadership and improving our management development programs, but also making our policies easier to follow. And some of the work we're doing in re-providing the HR service is to make that easier for staff and managers to get answers to questions quickly, services direct to them. But taking this forward on the more major pieces that this is saying to us is around a dual approach. So one is recognising there are some deep trust themes that we need to tackle. But also there are some local bespoke issues that flex across the organisation depending on where you work. So we're trying to balance both of those. And so the dual approach will be some trust-wide led themes to work through, but also giving some flexibility locally in the divisions for certain work to take place that affects those staff locally. That will be done through listening events, team discussions, and you said we did approach, but I think it's fair to say that's not as mature yet as we'd want the plan, and there's certainly some flexibility to develop that plan. We'll be focusing on that over the next few weeks. So really, that's the high-level overview. Happy to take questions and any discussion points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. If I could just start off with a couple of points which I discussed with Kim. And thank you very much for all the work that's going on in this. Reading the paper, I'm not sure that we have the laser-like focus, and of course I may be wrong, I'm not sure we have the laser-like focus on the so-called agency question 25, around, would you recommend your friends and family to be treated here, or would you recommend people to work here? And it seems to me that if we could have a real laser focus on that, and that improved considerably, that would send a very strong signal to staff and to the public that our staff want their friends and family to be treated here, and B, they'd want people to work here. So I think that's kind of important. In terms of how staff are actually feeling, when I used to do this sort of thing, the gold standard was to have professionally facilitated focus groups, so people felt safe to actually say how they were feeling. I'm not sure if we're doing any of that, but if we really want to understand how our staff are feeling, we probably do need some kind of professional process to secure those outputs. Just a suggestion, because I'm non-executive. And again, this is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, but I'm not sure we take sufficient account of the level of vacancies that we have at any one time, and the effect that that must have on staff satisfaction. Because if you put vacancies and sickness together, it'll vary clearly across the organisation, but at any one time, 1 in 6 of our staff might be unavailable to us through holding a vacancy or people being sick. And I feel that must have some effect on an organisation that's running very hot. So those are just my contributions, perhaps to be considered as part of the overall package. But are there any other comments? Kim?
Yeah, it's already triangulating, isn't it? I really liked slide 7, and I didn't know how the conversation was going to go, but it's absolutely true. Managers don't just influence performance, they shape the daily experience of work. And we've heard that coming up through reports today. Supporting managers' well-being is not a nice to have. It's central to performance, but it's not just central to performance. It role models and leans into the culture of that unit or team or ward. I'm supremely conscious, and this isn't about ticking a box. We probably only now have 3 to 4 months. And I do think, and David and I spoke about it, we're going to have to, laser focus is the word, we're going to have to reduce what is the art of the doable. And I know, Paul, you and I spoke, I think this is too broad. I don't think it's going to have the impact. With the new divisions, I'd like to see how we committed that they were new teams. We've just spoken about they really have been honest and open, and some of them are clear they need more training and development in having difficult conversations. You know, Mary and I speak. This is not in medical training. You know, they come up through a pattern, they get leadership positions, and then they get this plethora of things. But actually, our clinical chairs, supported by their other senior leaders, are key in this. And if we want to be seen serious, and we've spoken a lot about this at board, we've all had our voice heard, and I can see it coming through comments through. Actually, what are we going to do that's going to make a tangible difference, that is going to be able to say, we've listened, we've heard? I don't want it to be tick box, because we've got to sustain, but I think we need some work in just drilling this down and then being clear to the message we're giving our divisional leaders, and then around the cultural work, what learning development are we able to do that will drive some impact, as opposed to traumatising our new senior leaders, re-traumatising staff, and having no result or a worse result this time round. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I think that's an important leadership statement for the board to take on board. Could I go to Isabel next, please?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Paul, for the report. And I agree with all the comments that have been made so far. And I think given the time pressure and the urgency to start looking at what is doable within a very short space of time in the next few months, picking up on David's point about professional support to look at testing how people are feeling in the organisation, I think is a really good idea. I think there's a shortcut to that, which is basically taking the leadership teams within the divisions and taking them out for an hour and sitting with them and saying, okay, in your view, what are the things that you feel you're going to need to support a real step change over the next 3 to 4 months? And what can we do to support you in that? So where are your gaps? And whether that's around difficult conversations or whether it's around something else, it'd be very, very easy and quick to be able to get a sense of what we need to put in place quickly to support people. I think the other piece that for me, and it's showing up time and time again, is our appraisal rates, which we all know perhaps the reasons around that. I'm not suggesting that appraisal can necessarily fundamentally change something in the next 2 to 3 months. But I do think, again, there's a very quick piece of work that could be done to say, why is it so poor? What is it we need to do differently? Can we put the clock back to start again around appraisal and really rethink that? So there's a few discrete things that I think organisationally we can do. And I would be saying that given my background, but I actually feel quite optimistic that given the laser focus that Kim's talking about and the lead from the chief executive around this, I think that we can achieve quite a lot in the next few months. So, and you know, certainly as a board, I think we should all be prepared to throw ourselves into supporting the work as much as we possibly can.
Just to mention, Dame Jill Morgan, the new regional chair, is visiting next week. One of the issues I want to raise with her is the literally thousands of pieces of paper which are associated with appraisal because of the NHS mandated process. And I'm sure if that could be streamlined, it would be a lot easier to undertake appraisals. Simply avoid, reducing the overhead. So that's something I'll pick up with her to see if it's possible to get some leverage there. Next is Adrian, please.
Yeah, I think with regards to what we could achieve over the next 3 to 4 months, if we could eradicate corridor care, that would have a really big impact on our staff. They're not enjoying providing care in that environment. One of the questions is recommending your family for care and treatment at RCHT. So I think if we can achieve what Robin and the team are trying to achieve with regards to urgent and emergency care performance, that will enhance our results going forward, or potentially. And the other issue with regards to appraisals, something that I've said for a long time, is we need to look at the quality of the appraisals as well as the quantity, because for me, the benefit is having a good, meaningful two-way appraisal, two-way communication appraisal. So I would be looking at the quality as well as the quantity.
We've got Kelvin Hipperson, Chief Information Officer, and could we give the last word, if that's acceptable, to Richard Kramer, Chair of People and Culture, so that we can move on? Because I think that we know the direction we're headed. Kelvin.
I was going to make a very similar point about simplifying the appraisals process. Talking to my team, we actually do review our results, and appraisals was part of the conversation. And it was kind of a really interesting conversation around when you look at the complexity of the appraisal form and then the really simple questions that are in the survey. And it's those sorts of mismatches, I think, that do drive some of the problems we have in the survey of back to we need a laser focus on what supports our staff to help them to do their jobs better. We even had a conversation around the policy tends to make people think appraisals are solely geared towards advancement. And so a lot of people are immediately turned off from the appraisal process because they're actually happy in their job. They're not necessarily looking for an advancement. So we've certainly been trying to communicate all of those points that have been made here around it's about a two-way conversation to support people to do the job as well. And maybe that's what we really need to reflect in any changes. I know there is an aspect of advancement, but that should be a tiny aspect of it, really. That will happen as a consequence of choices and decisions that people make.
There's only about 4 things in my view: mutual feedback, review of objectives, setting new objectives, and development needs. But professionals might not agree. Well, they do agree.
Yeah, I do agree with that.
So could I go to Richard Kramer then, and perhaps we could then
Just from a People and Culture Committee perspective and Chair's role. So to reflect the conversation, yes, I agree. The success is about ruthless prioritisation, as Kim said, and clear accountabilities through Robin and the divisions, clear board oversight. I think the clues are on the paper. The 3 areas that we want to shift the dial on from a people and culture are appraisals, raising concerns, and health and safety, climate, particularly unwarranted sexual behaviour and wellbeing, as Paul has said. They're the ones that we want to focus on, and there can be some clear actions from that. The culture programme needs to align, the staff there needs to align very closely with the culture programme, and a lot of the work around feeling pride about working for RCHT is through the culture programme that is going to be led by Ella. And if we really laser focus on those 3 areas and the culture work, then in 6 months' time, people hopefully will see, I feel prouder about the place, and I can see some improvement on those areas. The one thing I want to pick up that probably isn't sufficiently in the plan and reflects the conversation we just had on Freedom to Speak Up, I think there needs to be much more work around supporting staff to raise concerns. We say it is a priority, but I would like a bit more there about how we support staff, ensure people are listening to, confidence that action is being taken, providing feedback, monitoring patterns of concerns and so on. I think we could be a bit more laser focused on that in order to deliver this success, so that we can really show that the programme is changing staff experience in those areas.
So the recommendations to the board, I'm not sure really capture the spirit and the substance of the discussion. So rather than noting the results, I wonder whether we should be receiving them with quite deep concern, actually, because they are very disappointing and we need to improve them. I think it needs to be said that we are the best performing acute trust west of Bristol, but equally with the staff satisfaction we've got, I'm not sure that position is sustainable. So there's a disconnect there. So coming to Kim's leadership statement, laser-like focus, sprinting over the next 3 or 4 months, really focusing on the questions that matter, really understanding what staff think, improving appraisals, all the other things that have been said really need to be an important part of this package. So against that background, I suggest rather than noting everything, we should, as I say, receive the results with deep concern, need for a very focused and accelerated action plan, and then capturing the rest of the richness of the discussion, Isabel, so that Kim, Isabel and Kim, so that Isabel through her culture work and others through the culture work and Kim through her leadership of the organisation, can really drive a process of improvement that all staff can engage in.
Yes, absolutely. I don't think it does it any justice to say note. I think we have to absolutely accept that whilst we're one of the best in the country, we have got much to do as regards our culture and how we demonstrate that that we value our staff.
Could you pass all that on to Alison as well, please? And have you comfortable with all of that, Lindsay? You got all of that?
Amend the resolution.
You can amend the resolutions. Perhaps when we come back from our break, you can pop them in the chat. So shall we take a break at that point? Maybe come back at what, 10:02, Lindsay? If we come back then at 10:02, we'll continue with section B. Thank you all very much. So welcome back, everybody. I hope you've all managed to get a break. And we're now going to go into section B of the agenda, which is reports and matters that arise from our committees. And as I always say, but particularly for new members, we do trust our committees to do their work, but it's also important that when committee reports come to the board, every board member's got the opportunity to check and challenge, but on the assumption that the committee has done its work. So what we do is to have the non-executive chair of the committee introduce the committee report and point out things which have been escalated from the committee for the board's attention, either because they're so important or because they need a board decision. But if any members want to comment on any other aspects of the committee reports, that's fine. We don't go through all the same executive reports that the committee had to save time, so it's the committee that leads the process. So having just explained that, perhaps I could go to Isabel, the Chair of Quality Assurance Committee, for that report. Isabel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you. And I will keep this brief. The paper is there for everybody to read, and it's 10 pages, which probably doesn't represent adequately the amount of work that the committee has undertaken over the last year. It's been an extremely busy time. And I would like to thank all my committee members and attendees for the effort they put into coming to the meetings and having a very good, high quality discussion and debate. So I think that's the first thing. I can tick a box and say I've thanked everybody, first of all, because I think that's really important. And I also, if I'm thanking everybody, I ought to also mention the team from within corporate governance who support the committee so well over the course of the year. We wouldn't be able to get through without them. So again, my thanks. The report is pretty self-explanatory. I think, as I say, it's been a busy year. The scope of the agenda is very broad, as you'll see, having read the paper. But the things I just wanted to highlight, which we did agree that we should escalate so that the board is completely aware of what's happening, were two incidents, one around fire and one around asbestos. Both of which Brian and his team reported through to our quality committee to make sure that we could take assurance about the actions that were being taken to address both the incidents or the three incidents that were mentioned to us. So I think that was one area that we just felt the board needed to be mindful of, and there's more in the report about that. The second area was making the board aware about ongoing risks that we have around the levels of freedom for information requests and subject access requests. It was brought to our attention that there was quite a major backlog around some of that work. And so as a committee, we requested an action plan to address that backlog, and we are continuing to monitor those actions until we reach a point where we are satisfied. But we felt the board needed to be made aware. And then I think the other areas that the board, I'm sure, are already aware of, but they're continuing to take time for us as a committee, and very rightly so, to provide a focus on. And those would be urgent and emergency care, which we've already had a very good discussion today around that. Our stroke service, I think, is another one that we're keeping on our agenda on a monthly basis to maintain momentum around assurance. Our 7-day services have also come to our attention again, and we have regular reporting around our ability to deliver against the standards for 7-day services. I think more recently we were made aware of some issues in our symptomatic breast service. And at our last quality meeting, we received a very helpful report from the team to both surface the issues for us, so that we were really aware of how important an issue it was, but also with an attached action plan for us to be able to then monitor progress to make sure that we are getting back on track for patients with symptomatic breast issues. And we were lucky, we were very pleased to receive that report from the clinicians involved in delivering the service. They came to the committee and discussed that with us, which we very much welcomed. So I think without dwelling too long, I think the only other thing to say is that, as with all committees, we have an annual review of how well have we done, how effective has the committee been, and an assessment of things that we might want to think about in terms of improvement for next year, and whether we need to alter the terms of reference or not. I don't think on this occasion we're altering the terms of reference. I think some of the membership might change depending on personnel changes. But I think as far as the committee functioning, I think we were very pleased to receive a very good assessment of the effectiveness of the Quality Committee, which I think is testament to both the authors of the papers that come through and also those members that sit on the committee to then debate the issues. So I'll pause at that point. I think, as I say, the paper is there. And if you've got any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them with help from other committee members, no doubt.
Thank you very much indeed, Isabel. You always thank everyone else, so just like to thank you for chairing the committee, because Quality Assurance Committee is A, very important, and B, a very heavy workload. So we're very appreciative of all you do. Are there any comments or questions for Isabel on the work of the Quality Assurance Committee and the things that have been escalated?
Yeah, thank you, Isabel. That was really helpful. Sorry if that's me causing an echo.
Put your microphone on.
Don't think so.
Sorry, we've just got some echo.
That better? Yeah. So just double checking as well, something you mentioned in terms of the issues for escalation or notification to the Trust Board, which are summarised very nicely on the front page. You're not asking Board to do anything else in terms of debating extra resources at this stage. You're just flagging those for our attention.
Absolutely. And I think just to take assurance that the committee are reviewing and monitoring any action plans coming from those areas that we're escalating. So at this stage, it's for information. We may well be coming back at some future point and saying, well, we're now at a point where we do need to request whatever that is, whether it's additional resources or whatever. But at this stage, no, it is there for information so that board members are aware of what we're covering in the committee.
That's clear. Thank you.
Right.
I guess, Kim, the executive is aware of this issue.
Yes, I think it's really important to note, and Isabel, I chaired Executive Risk Group last Friday, and the only comfort I take from some of the escalations is they were escalated through Risk Committee, so there's good triangulation, and part of that is I think the assurance that we are monitoring it through Quality Assurance Committee, but we're really clear between a Quality Assurance Committee and the Risk Committee that we need to see prompt action or further escalation from the board.
Oh, that's really good to hear, Kim. Thank you. And I think I also take assurance in the fact that there's good crossover between the Quality Committee and particularly the Finance and Performance Committee. My colleague Adrian sits with me on Quality, and I sit on his Finance Committee, so we're able to triangulate a bit some of what's coming out from both committees. So yeah, thank you, Kim.
So it's escalated to the board. The board is aware of it. But the board is not being asked to take any specific actions at this time. But clearly we'll monitor it.
Yes. And I think it's important to note, as you said, David, if it can't be resolved through the next cycle of committees, then further escalation will be required.
Board content with the approach? Any other comments? Brian, we usually thank you in absentia, but now we can thank you in person. I know you've been dealing with some really tricky issues around the fire issues and the asbestos. So can I just thank you and your team for the way that you responded? Because, you know, it's not what happens in life, it's how you deal with it. And I think you and your team dealt with it very well, so thank you. Adrian, is there anything you want to say? No, so, subject to the comment about escalation to the board on freedom of information, are we happy to receive and note the Quality Assurance Committee reports from its March and April meetings? Thank you very much. Now, there are certain things which boards, NHS trust boards, are required to receive as a result of various national reports, which is why they're separately on the agenda. So we now go on to 12.1, which is the maternity and perinatal safety report. Lenny?
This is a summarised report. So this is a new format.
Can you, sorry, could you speak up?
This is a summarised report for all board members. The full report that went to the Quality Assurance Committee is available to all board members on request. So any feedback in terms of this paper would be warmly welcomed. There are 4 areas that that are in the paper, which bring to the board's attention in relation to our service, but also our requirements of CNST year 8. So the PMRT quarterly report is included, and noticeably it states there have been no stillbirths since November, 90 days without a death and 4 months without, sadly, 1 death. And this is a distinct change, an improvement from the cluster of cases that we saw in June, July and August. There's sadly been 3 infant deaths recorded, and whilst not perinatal, there have been referenced in the PMRT report. I've also included the response to Embrace 2000 report and our data report for RCHT, which is referenced in Appendix 3. That's been completed by the bereavement team, with a similar report from the neonatal service being peer reviewed and will come to board next month. This does show an increase in neonatal deaths over the 3-year reporting period, putting us as an outlier for comparable trusts. But for assurance, all death reviews were completed, with over 90% of them having external reviews from another trust. There were no themes or systematic issues identified, which I think is really important. And there was a low stillbirth rate in the comparator group. And all of the actions from those reviews have been closed, and the learning shared widely across the teams. And our data for 2025 is assuring, with a decrease in neonatal deaths. People will know our qualified in specialty for neonatal service remains a challenge in terms of staffing. We have a new clinical matron that is in post, came from external to the organisation as being a really fresh approach to her, and I'm grateful for colleagues in HR and others who are supporting us with a different approach around recruitment. And we have seen an increase in terms of recruitment to those posts, and I'm working with the team about a proposed trajectory about how then we move out of our incentive in terms of supporting our staff currently. And then the other bit I just wanted to finish on is that we have been notified by CNST of our achievement of compliance with Year 7. I just want to record my thanks to all of the perinatal team for the work that they have done in delivering that, which has just been exceptional.
Thank you very much, Bernie.
Yep, Bernie, I absolutely echo that. Thank you to all that contributed, and it's really great to see the achievement of Year 7. And it would be remiss of me as CEO to thank all of our midwives. And I know Bernie, Robin, Mary and myself went off on Tuesday to celebrate International Day of the Midwife. And that was really warmly received. And it was just a special day to give thanks to our midwives who look after families each and every day. So it's not for that to not go unnoticed. And as Bernie and I found out, it was also the first day of the second area going with the silent hospital, and that was really great to see Brian as well. So really excited, and also made for some reason, because it was so quiet, Bernie and I were whispering. So it just goes to show, and I think that is something we absolutely need going forward, to look at other areas. As we know, hospital at night noise in particular it's really a constant theme in patient complaints. So look forward to that. So just to note that, thank you.
We're not used to you whispering.
No, it was an experience.
Could I just ask you, Bernie, we've got this situation about neonatal staffing, which we understand, and the mitigations are being put in place, but it must be having quite an effect on the other staff who are having to compensate for it. Can you give us a flavour of how that's feeling to the staff?
So it is challenging, and it's felt, I think, beyond the neonatal service, because there is a pool from paediatrics to support. So kind of recruitment overall in that area is really, really important. They are being well supported, and I think the approach that Zita is giving in terms of the external piece around recruitment, I think, is healthy, but she's also doing some work internally with the team, particularly around accelerating development of competencies of those staff coming in. So there's the recruitment bit, but there's also the retention piece, and a different approach about how people can achieve their foundation course, which is critical then to be qualified in special, to get onto the neonatal course. So I think it is challenging, but the division has really good oversight on this, and we also track it through our safer care processes on a daily basis, and they obviously have direct access to me if there's any areas of particular concern.
Any other comments for Bernie or questions? If not, can we thank you very much for the report, Bernie. 12.2, actually this is going to be the Bernie George show for a while now. The next one is an acronym which new members will get used to, PSIRP, Patient Safety Incident Response Strategy Extension. Bernie.
Thank you. So I'm going to take this report as read, and huge thanks to Naomi Burden, our patient safety specialist. This was discussed extensively at QAC. Every organisation, as you know, is required to have a patient safety incident response plan. RCHT was one of the early adopters in terms of PSIRF, and at that point we were looking at annual plans. Learning nationally is that actually you need longer to embed those improvements over time. So we took to the Quality Assurance Committee this proposal for an extension in terms of our current PSIRF plan as outlined in the report, and that was fully discussed and endorsed at QAC.
Okay, so this has been through QAC. Any comments or questions? Okay.
Can I just check, improving discharge? Really good to see the work done. Will that also feed into the safeguarding operational groups as well?
Once we've got the patient, once we've the report is in draft around the patient safety incident investigation, we will look at pulling that across. Safeguarding have been involved in terms of been a stakeholder in terms of that PSII.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Happy to move on. 12.3, Patient Experience Strategy Extension. Bernie? Oh, I'm so beg your pardon, Adam. Sorry.
No, it's no problem. So just on the, I'll get the acronym on the PSIRP report.
PSIRP, yeah.
Just checking in, I think you implied it in what you said, Bernie, that you requesting that we agree an extension to the PSIRP thing is not unusual. There will be the majority of the other acute trusts will be asking for a longer period of time to do this robustly.
Yes. So when PSIRP was first launched nationally, we were an early adopter. The recommendation at that stage was to review your PSIRP plan annually. As more organisations have moved through, and the work that it involves around getting those sustainable improvements over time in terms of that learning embedded, the recommendation is that you move away from an annual and you move to more of a 2 to 3 year approach to your PSIRP plan.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Sorry, I missed your hand there. Are we happy now to move on to Patient Experience Strategy Extension, item 12.3? Bernie?
Thank you. So again, thanks to colleagues at QUAC, we have a patient experience strategy, which was due for renewal. People will be aware that there is a national quality strategy coming out, and alongside the 10-year plan, there is a huge emphasis in terms of, or greater emphasis around patient experience. We thought that the quality strategy might be launched sooner nationally, but it hasn't. And what we want to do is make sure that, as opposed to providing a strategy and then reviewing it in light of the national quality strategy, that we wait for that to come and do and develop our own patient experience strategy at the same time. That was the proposal that was taken to QUAC and endorsed for onward approval here. There is no material risk in terms of delivery of what we're currently doing in terms of making that extension.
Can I just ask, I think I know the answer, but it'd be just good to have it from it said at board. Although we've paused the strategy, it doesn't mean we're stopping.
Not stopping the work.
Anything on patient experience, and actually it's more important to do more and more. On that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely not stopping anything, Richard. It's a good question.
Through Penny Dash's report and various other initiatives, patient experience is going to become more and more important.
That now with the National Patient Experience Director advert out, which will report directly not just to the CNO but also to the Chief Exec of the combined department. So it's good.
So for those two items, there are 4 approvals recommended to the board. I won't read them all out because they're all there in front of you, but are you happy to approve them? The extension for the patient safety incident response strategy and the patient experience strategy extension. Board content?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bernie. 12.4 is the Learning from Deaths Q4 report. Mary.
So I will assume this has been read, and thanks to Ray Sinclair and Becky Cooper for what is always a really comprehensive report with an awful lot of information therein. So I'm just going to pull out some key points. Our overall mortality position, so our core indicators are broadly within expected limits. There are lots of abbreviations here and acronyms, but our hospital standardised mortality ratio is within the expected range and continues to show a sustained downward trend. And our crude mortality figures are not alerting. And in actual fact, there's been a fall from 11.4 to 9.7 deaths per 1,000 admissions over the course of the period October 23 to January 26. Testament to the fact that we triangulate a number of measures of mortality and look for early indications where things may be trending in the wrong direction. Our summary hospital mortality index, so our SHMI, was noted that whilst it was overall within the accepted limits, it appeared to be trending in the wrong direction. And so our trust have done a deep dive on that and looked at our statistical performance charts. And we recognise, in common with several other organisations actually, that was upward trending almost certainly as a result of our slightly different pathways and models of care, with urgent admissions brought into SDMA being coded as elective, and therefore inadvertently impacting on our elective mortality figures. So we're doing a retrospective audit from April 25 onwards to ensure that we are not missing anything else within that data, but we are happy triangulating it with our HMSR and our crib mortality that is what we're seeing. We have one alert on HSMR, Hospital Standardised Mortality Ratio, and that's fractured neck of femur. And we are monitoring our performance of fractured neck of femur management through the Quality Assurance Committee. We recognise that HSMR is a very good overall measure of trust level mortality. It isn't particularly good at individual conditions, and particularly fractured neck of femur. It doesn't take into account our frailty index of the population of Cornwall. It doesn't take into account any delay in discharges, and we recognise as as a factor of the condition that a number of deaths from fractured neck of femur occur post-operatively, but within the first 30 days in an organisation that's got good flow and no problem with delayed discharges. Many of those deaths would occur outside of the hospital and wouldn't be included within the HMSR data. If we have any issues with flow, and we've already spoken about some of our concerns around flow and delayed discharges, that does get included and will falsely elevate in terms of a benchmarking measure your HMSR. So we're using the National Hip Fracture Database as the recognised national marker. We're not an outlier for mortality within the National Hip Fracture Database, but we are above average. So we're still taking that very seriously. We're tracking it through the Quality Assurance Committee, but we have made really good progress in our key performance indicator metrics across the last year, and we'll continue to make sure that we follow that until we are happy that that is sustained. In terms of priority groups and learning themes, we had 4 deaths within the learning disability and autism group in Q3. Completed reviews demonstrate all the care is good or excellent, which I think is important to note. I'll come on to, I know in the next part of the report talks about our structured judgment reviews. I'll touch on that at the end. We had 2 deaths that were looked at in that quarter through the patient safety review process. Key learning focused on handover and communication failures, and recognition and escalation of diabetic ketoacidosis. That learning has been taken back through to the relevant clinical teams to make sure that it is embedded. We had complaints linked to deaths in 3 cases, and the recurring themes were communication with families, documentation quality, and again, fed back, and there is action attached to all 3 of those. In Q3, there were 18 coronial inquests, and we received 3 preventing future deaths notices. They're set out in the report. 1 was associated with surgical day case medication processes, and there is an action plan underpinning that. 1 was around pressure ulcer prevention and handover failures, and again, there is an action plan associated with that, and all of this is fed back to the coroner. And then 1 was about bottle feeding classification. And this was a very sad death of an infant who had multiple touch points with healthcare professionals across the system, not just with RCHT. And a frequent question asked was, how are you feeding your infant? And the absolutely correct answer was always, I'm bottle feeding my infant. And it transpired that bottle feeding was not formula feeding. It was cow's milk that was in that bottle. And there were quite a large number of learning points in this case, but one importantly has been escalated not just across the system, but nationally, because when you went on the NHS England patient information pages, when you tried to seek advice around bottle feeding, well, formula feeding your infant, the information always came back about bottle feeding. That didn't refer to formula feeding as well. So we've been able to actually influence national information and policy, which I think is really important and shows the importance of some of the work that we do around the learning from deaths. I won't cover the perinatal mortality because Bernie's already touched on that on her report, other than to say that we always look very, very carefully at perinatal deaths, and what has come out time and time again and is testament to the maternity team is the strength of bereavement care that is offered, and I wanted to pull that out particularly and thank them for that. It's really important at such a very, very difficult time. I mentioned structured judgment reviews. 32 structured, it's a tongue twister, that one. Structured judgment reviews were completed for Q3. The vast majority rated care as good and excellent. There were 4 outstanding SJRs at the time of writing the report. What I would say, however, is that we know that we have some work to do around consistency and timeliness of completion of structured judgment reviews. You will see as a starred item the learning from deaths policy. which we won't be talking about in any great detail, but a significant change in the learning from death policy is that what we will now have is a trained pool of people who consistently undertake structured judgment reviews, will build up expertise, maintain expertise, will be remunerated for the task in hand, and will be doing them in a much more timely fashion. So it's a different model. They will buddy with some subject matter experts where we need subject matter experts, but we expect to see fewer or no outstanding SJRs, and SJRs completed to a high and consistent standard as a result of that policy change. The other thing I would draw out is the mortality review process. All teams are expected to do mortality review as part of their normal governance processes. We are only achieving that in 65% of cases at the moment. We now have the team led by Ray Sinclair and the clinical effectiveness team rather, are led by Ray Sinclair, working with all the new clinical chairs now that we've got the new divisional structure in place to make sure that mortality reviews are being undertaken in a timely fashion. And if they are not being undertaken, there is an adequate surrogate process, as we will see within the oncology teams, for instance, who do undertake that process, but it is in a different way. Medical examiners are scrutinising just over 80% of deaths, with the remainder being referred to the coroner. And we aren't identifying at this stage any overarching themes or trends. So they were the key points I wanted to pull out. Very happy to take questions.
Thanks very much, Mary, and it's great for us to know that you're really on top of all of this. And for new members, this is a really important report for us because it helps us triangulate everything, look at trends, and also see comparative data from other acute hospitals. Any questions or comments, Richard?
Almost covered it, Mary, because you talked about structured judgment reviews, and they were looking at health inequalities and people learning to speak to autism. There were 2 structured judgment reviews that were outstanding and not completed, and both of those cases involved older people with pneumonia. So I don't know if you can give us an indication when they will be finalised and if there's any trends.
They are already finalised. It's just at the time of writing the report they were outstanding. I think we are now, though we may have others that haven't yet been completed, those have been completed. And what I didn't present was that when we do reviews of the deaths of anybody within that lead group, we also do look at the inequality data to make sure that we aren't seeing particular flags across the demographics, small numbers in this particular cohort quarter.
Thank you, Richard. Becky.
It's just for information, really, that the unfortunate case with the bottle feeding was cascaded out by the coroner to all of primary care as well, and a mandatory kind of action to look at it and to reflect on practice. And can safely say that has happened, certainly within our own practice.
Okay. It was a really good piece of system work.
Yeah, it was.
Robin is next.
Building on that point and triangulating back to earlier conversations we've had today about people being confident to say this isn't working or I need to speak up here. It's a great example. It wasn't speak up, I know, but it's a great example of getting underneath an issue has influenced national policy change. And this, for me, I wonder if there's something about us demonstrating to our entire organisation this is another example of why it's important. So when we ask for an SJR, it's because it delivers this. If something hasn't gone right in your area, it's absolutely fine to say this hasn't gone right, because then we can get underneath it and we can change our process, or sometimes we can stop something happening that reoccurring nationally. And I think when we're trying to tie in how do we encourage people to say something isn't right, there's another live example and a really solid example.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Robin. And it was something through the culture programme I was hoping to pick up with Ray and Bernie actually now around how do we share learning from our clinical governance more openly across the organisation, so that it speaks to that point around, are we a learning organisation? And we very much state that we are, yet the feedback from our staff is that it doesn't always feel like we are. So I think there is something around how do we communicate this to say, even when things don't go well, we learn from them, we share that, and it can influence things to get better. It loops back to that being on a micro level as an individual, right up to a system level. So I think we could do more on that.
Okay, thank you for that, Robin and Ella. Could we give the final word to Kim, please?
Yeah, thank you, Mary. Always a comprehensive report. Thank you for highlighting the structured judgment reviews, because we did have a problem in the past, didn't we, with having enough people, and the fact you found a solution to that is really encouraging because it allows that more timely reporting. Appendix 7, it might just be me, the 5, because we said we had 77 clinical audits, are the 5 in Appendix 7 the ones that you are worried about, and hence it
77 in total. They're the 5 in the quarter that have gone through care.
Oh, okay, not 5 that you were worried about. No, super. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you.
Thanks, very sorry to be pedantic, but just in case the family reads it, patient 1 on page 10, it should be quality of life, not quality of life.
Oh, okay. I didn't spot it. Thank you. We can change that.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. I think we've discussed this for assurance, Lindsay. So we can note that we've discussed the report for assurance with thanks to Mary and the team who produce it. And perhaps it's worth noting the system point that Rebecca made. So can we go on then to item 13, Finance and Performance Committee Assurance Report. I don't know if you're going to mention this, Adrian, but Kim and I discussed yesterday that we ought to report to the board that the SRO for the Women and Children's Hospital is now going to be
Ian, yes, and the 2 specialist advisors, of course, will be Brian and Bernie George.
Thank you. We also just note that. Do we have to approve it or just note it? So we just note that then, Ian, and thank you for taking it on. Adrian.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So bearing in mind that this report is backwards looking and some of these things have progressed since we recommended them for escalation to the board, there were 3 items: the women and children's programme risks, and the committee recommended a greater level of information and assurance at board level on these risks, which has now been addressed. The eCare risk profile and the need for assurance on the next steps and the revised plan. And we recognised the positive transition from cost improvement programmes to our internally managed finance sustainability programme. We wanted to extend our congratulations to the finance team and to the whole trust, actually, for us coming in and delivering our financial plan for the 7th consecutive year. Having said that, we did it with a caveat because we raised concerns with regards to the levels of non-recurrent SIP, and that we will be focusing on that in the coming months as we develop our financial sustainability programme plans for the coming year. And we did a deep dive on the integrated performance report, and we were looking at actions to eradicate corridor care because of the safety and the financial implications associated with that, and the continuation of our clinical vision of flow. And that's all I wanted to bring to the board's attention.
Excellent. I was going to pick up the point about the result on the next item, but I think it's, we've already thanked Ian in private board, but it's the whole organisation, obviously, that delivers the result. But nevertheless, Ian and the team managed to land the jumbo jet on a postage stamp. And I'd like to repeat in public our thanks to everyone who's been involved in delivering the 7th break-even year, which is quite unusual in the NHS, but particularly Ian and his team for their financial leadership. Thank you. Any questions or comments for Adrian, please? If not, can I take the opportunity to keep moving? On to item 13.1, which is the month 12 revenue financial report. Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair and colleagues. So I'll take the paper as read in the normal style. It sets out our year-end position to the end of March for the 12 months, and that's now subject to external audit scrutiny, as in line with normal NHS process, and that will conclude with our extraordinary board towards the latter part of June. As we've already touched on, we set a break-even plan at the beginning of the financial year, which had a significant savings challenge within it, and we've managed to achieve that, which is a fantastic achievement all round from an organisational perspective. We've delivered a small £92,000 surplus, and that's on expenditure of £760 million. So the postage stamp and jumbo jet reference is absolutely appropriate in terms of the scale of spend that we have as an organisation in delivering that position. It is significant, and it's not unique. It's not uniform across the NHS that our organisations have been able to deliver that. So my thanks to everybody that's involved in that, and as you've already alluded to, Chair, that represents the 7th year in a row that this organisation has been able to achieve a break-even financial position in line with our statutory duty. Important then to recognise what that means. So we're also in the position that our partners within the health system achieved break-even positions, both with Cornwall Foundation Trust and the Integrated Care Board. And as a result of that, the providers in the system have received a share of unallocated deficit support funding. So this is money that was earmarked for trusts that had financial deficit plans at the start of the year, but haven't been able to achieve the delivery of those deficit plans. And so money has been held back nationally by NHS England. So what they're doing is then using that money to incentivise those that have achieved and recognising that. And that's a different approach. We haven't seen that in previous years for members of the public and staff to be aware of. So that was an additional £4.9 million, so not an insignificant amount of money. Because it's offsetting at a national level deficits in other systems, we have to show that as a bottom line benefit. So it's not money we can actively spend, but it is cash backed, and it does reduce our cumulative deficits that's historic from before the 7 years that I've just referenced of break even. So it is a really positive thing, and it recognises nationally that financial stewardship and delivery of plans is really valued and important. It does secure the broader capital and revenue incentive that we've talked about previously for the system. Some of that, the revenue aspects, were built into our 26-27 financial plans, and the capital aspects have been agreed, and primarily for us, having worked through that with Cornwall Foundation Trust, will support our e-care programme and some improvements we want to make to staff areas as part of incentivising the collective effort that's gone into that. So that's really positive to have secured that. Quite quickly, we move into the new financial year. So there's an arbitrary date at the end of March, but in reality, financial stewardship carries on all the way through. So our focus has turned immediately onto that delivery through into April. The paper notes a couple of risks in that regard. So industrial action, which we talked about, occurred in April, and we had our longest single period of industrial action from resident doctors. That has a cost attached to it of about £425,000. That wasn't part of our plan, so we'll pick that up in the month one report in a bit more detail about how we're managing that. And we continue to use escalation spaces, as we've heard in the urgent emergency care update board today, which again come with a cost attached to them. So we absolutely have to keep that focus, not only from a financial perspective, but primarily for quality and safety and experience of our patients. But they do have an adverse financial impact when we've not got that care the way we want it as an organisation. We also touched about, and the paper has an update in it, in the work that's going on with our financial sustainability programme. So that's our multi-year programme of how we make sure we're identifying the future efficiencies and ways of working that will continue to sustain that financial delivery. And that's progressing well under that structure that we've put in place, and that was noted in the Finance and Performance Committee discussion. So happy to take any questions if there are any on that.
Excellent. One thing I'd just like to thank you for is the forensic line of sight you've given us to cash throughout the year and the deep dives on cash. because I remember saying to the board this time last year, if we didn't make our savings targets, we were in danger of running out of cash. And that was actually true because our cash position has never exceeded our financial savings target. But nevertheless, you've always kept the reserves of cash at a healthy level throughout the year. But I know for the non-executives, that's been a real source of assurance. So thank you for that. Any comments or questions for Ian? So could we note the position as set out on the agenda, but note with thanks to Ian and the team for delivering the result and to the whole organisation for the sacrifices that have been made to achieve the savings. Thank you very much, Ian. Takes us on then to the capital report, 11.3 for month 12.
Yeah, so again, the conclusion of the year from a capital perspective, I'll keep this really brief. Again, really positive in terms of the size and scale of our capital programme, so just over £53 million of capital spent improving our physical site and assets, our digital assets, and progressing some of our strategic schemes. We achieved a position which was just slight underspend against what we were forecasting, so we had a £228,000 overspend, but we'd got an agreed overspend of £250,000 linked to CFT having an underspend on one of our system-wide digital projects where it made sense for us to pick up the cost of that in full. So that was really positive, and again represents really good financial stewardship of our capital programme. Some of the significant items in there is the work we've continued to do on our fire protection across the estate, the strategic priorities in terms of e-care, and our women's and children's design and work, the LINAC replacements that we heard about in the opening reports today, and obviously robotic surgery that we've celebrated more recently as well. So some really important capital items within there, some that you see, but importantly as well, some that you don't in terms of the infrastructure and fabric of the buildings that we deliver care from. So that's really positive. So again, just my extended thanks to my team and to the capital subgroups who manage and prioritise this ruthlessly through the year to make sure that we come in and land at that year-end position. And then the only other aspect in the paper is to formally ask board to approve the PDC, so that's public dividend capital, so that's the funding we get from the national team for women's and children's for the project fees. We've received the memorandum of understanding ahead of the financial year this year, which is a really positive position for Brian and I to be in terms of that programme. And this is drawing down that funding in line with our original business case and the fees that we expect to incur this year. So again, happy just to take any questions, Chair.
As Kim will know, I raised at the regional summit the question of how undercapitalised the NHS is. There's been a recent Institute of Public Policy research report which showed that capital formation in the NHS is around 0.3%. For most of our competitors, it's 0.7%, so over twice as much. France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and so on have got 4 times as many imaging equipment, MRI scanners, and so on as England. So some of the issues we face, it's not really surprising when we're so undercapitalised. I don't think there was any appetite to consider it, but I've asked it to be considered at a future summit anyway. Any comments or questions on capital for Ian, please, as well?
Yeah, it's only just a quick question, Ian, on page 6 of the report where you're talking about the variances. Sorry if I've missed it, but did you say anything about the medical equipment? You're saying that there was an underspend because some of the planned purchases couldn't take place. Is that something that we revisit to make sure that we do go ahead and purchase?
Yeah, so with medical equipment one and that particular one, Isabel, that when we reprioritised the programme midway through the year, we asked the Medical Equipment Board to pull forward some of the, so one of the ways we can manage our year end, make sure we use all of our capital is by purchasing some items that we planned to purchase in, for example, April or May earlier. That comment reflects the fact that whilst there was really good work done by that team, and I do want to make that point really clearly, some of the delivery and ordering of items, because we have to make sure it's the right specification and all those sorts of things, didn't happen. They then get picked up. So next week, actually on Monday, we have our review of prioritisation for 26-27's capital programme, which has already been approved by board, but we go back round the boy on that to check check that if anything didn't get delivered last year, that we've got it and we've got a line of sight on it for the current financial year, if that makes sense. So.
Is there a link back to service? So for things that were not purchased, is there any impact on that for the clinical services that we were hoping to deliver with that equipment?
No, there wouldn't be, because it's essentially about the risk management. So these are assets that are in use. These are pieces of equipment that are in use, and we try and replace them before they get to a point of breaking. We do also have a blue smoke contingency, so that if a piece of equipment breaks today, that there is a mechanism to quickly replace that. So it's all done on a risk approach through the Medical Equipment Board and fed back and interacted quite closely with the divisions.
Thank you. Thank you.
So if the board's content to move on, could we note the position of the capital programme and approve the receipt of the 6.719 million of public dividend capital for the Women and Children's Hospital, please, for 2026-27. Thank you. Item 14 is the People and Culture Committee Assurance Report. Richard.
Okay, so I'll just focus on the key areas. So there was a real focus at the meeting on our key workforce metrics, and we talked about the need to support the divisions and their accountability for improving performance around metrics around sickness, appraisals and training compliance. We've already discussed the staff survey, so I won't go into that again. We also talked about reconnecting teams following organisational change, and I think Kim talked about that through her work at the beginning of the meeting. And we also talked about the proposed culture programme, and the intention is that we want colleagues to be more connected both to each other and to RCHT and engender that source of pride. And actually, if we get that right, I think we will retain our people, deliver stronger productivity and greater efficiency. And we said that the culture programme, which we fully supported and was really well put together, needed to be resourced appropriately and over duration of time. So it's not an episodic programme, and it needed to be progressed at pace. And I think that they're the things I want to cover, and then Paul and Lindsay will cover the medium-term workforce plan and the DEI board diversity plan.
Thanks, Richard. Any comments for Richard? So thank you for that report, Richard, and thanks to your committee. Item 14.1 is the medium-term workforce plan. Just for context for new members, we like to have a medium-term forward look of our three enabling strategies to support our trust strategy. We've got a medium-term financial plan, which is now well established. Brian is working on a medium-term estate strategy, including a master plan. And the third element is a medium-term workforce plan. So we've got the document, Paul.
Yeah, so I'll take the paper as read, and just for colleagues and members of the public, we have to submit a one-year plan normally every year, but we've also now moved it into a 3 to 4 year plan, which gives us the ability to look ahead and not be in a one-year cycle. Just a couple of thanks. Just want to thank the committee actually for the support and guidance on this People and Culture Committee, but also to finance colleagues who've worked with us really closely because we're trying to map the workforce elements over to match with the funding that we have as well. In saying that, this year, and the paper's slightly out of date at the time of writing, but the same pattern has emerged at the end of the year, which is the substantive workforce is slightly below plan. So we've got less substantive staff than we planned for. Part of that is due to us withholding, and David's chair pointed out that earlier, around our strategy approach to our workforce organisational change was to hold back vacancies, and we're now in a position where we can start to fill those vacancies, and that's definitely the forward plan. I want to make that point really clear. As a result of having less staff than we planned for, but clearly the same acuity and patient demand that we had, we've continued with the safer staffing through the use of bank and agency. So you'll see a slight increase with the plan we had for bank, but also a slight increase with agency. Just to say, we have got a downward trajectory of agency use despite the trust operational pressures, and that's been led by Bernie and Mary particularly, but also by all rostering teams and other booking managers. to say that agency use is less than about 1.4% of our staff spend, so well under the NHS target of 2%, which is a real achievement. Going forward, of course, the plan looks to reduce our reliance on temporary staffing and fill our establishment. The other issue that I think as well, David, you referred to earlier, was around sickness absence. And you talked about vacancies and sickness absence having an impact on staff, and we're aware of that triangulation. Part of this plan is to get us away from that position. So investing in health and wellbeing, particularly focusing on teams as we come out of organisational change, is also a key factor going forward. And our staff turnover remains fairly stable. Again, I think that's probably more geography. I think we need to work harder on retention, and the plan does look forward to retention as part of a key milestone going forward, as well as wellbeing. So having said that's year one, that's more easy to talk about. The future plan is a little bit more opaque in the sense that it's difficult to do some detailed planning at the moment where we can't accurately predict how care will be moving around the system for members of the public, so care closer to home, digital support for patients, which means less time in an acute hospital and less need to come to an acute hospital. That's something that we need to work better on. I think the plan admittedly needs a little bit more detail on there, and I'm really grateful for some support from colleagues around the table and other colleagues around how we can get better at predicting and trying to plan forward for that. The paper does try and link to the trust strategy, the NHS 10-year plan as well, and the move to care being in the right place for our patients in Cornwall, the Isles of Scilly. It also talks about some of the onboarding and how we have staff join the trust. So we want to engage more with our educational counterparts, and we want to grow our own workforce locally as best we can. So it's a very high level overview. I'll pause there and happy to take any questions or comments. Thank you, Chair.
Well, it's good to have the ball on the field. So thank you for that. I think it would be interesting for me, at least, I don't know about others, to have some more thinking about, and it's touched on, what the workforce of the future will look like. So, for example, Chris Whitty's been talking about doctors who are comfortable working in community and acute settings. What sort of diagnostics and therapeutics will become available over the next 10 years? What sort of co-creation will there be, and blurring of professional boundaries? There's all sorts of interesting issues about the workforce of the future, and it would be quite good if we could pretend we're in 2036 and think about what our workforce would look like then. Kim?
Yeah, I agree. It's a little opaque, but I think we're going to have to start putting some meat on the bones, aren't we? And you and I spoke. I think we're hoping that the workforce strategy is being launched imminently. So it's an opportunity to go back round, I think, and have a look at what's in there. I think we can already look at some of the collaboration and movement in service models. I suppose for me, the two things that I'd like to see highlighted more is key to your workforce is your leadership, and especially your management leadership, and we've had many conversations today. And then, of course, staff experience. How are we going to bring that out? So when people read it, they can see, right, that's exactly the direction. This is how I'm going to be supported and developed. And that's what we can add into appraisals. So it might, everyone has an appraisal, and it's not always for promotion. Actually, sometimes it's about recognising experience. And if I look at our acute workforce at the moment, there's a lot of work that we need to do that actually enables them to be able to work in another setting potentially, or work slightly differently. So I would like, hopefully the workforce strategy will come out, but I don't want to lose those, considering that's really, we've just said our staff, our leadership, we're listening. I don't want to lose that in this. Thank you.
Should we gather up all the comments and then come back to you, Paul? Can we go to Ella first, then Ray, then Adam, and then Robin? Ella.
Thank you. So we say in the paper that we'll be increasingly kind of aligning this to our new trust strategy, and I think it helpfully does start to kind of face into that, which is really good. I think we need to probably, as you say, Kim, absolutely pull out the kind of, what does this mean for our leadership and staff experience? That was one of the key things I thought as well, because we talk about that so much in terms of our culture plan. And I think also, if we think about the 3 shifts in the NHS 10-year plan,
the workforce implications of each of those. So as AI and we move to much more digital, what does that mean in terms of the skill sets we need to be recruiting? For us down here, what does that mean in terms of is there a skills gap? Is there something we actively need to be kind of addressing in terms of that gap? But so there's kind of the digital one, there's the community one, which we do talk about in this paper, but I think we need to be really clear around as the acute. Our strategy isn't necessarily saying services transfer simply to another provider. This is about our workforce working in a different way. And I think reflecting that in here would also be helpful, because there will be, again, some skills gaps that emerge from that. And it also means that when our leaders are recruiting, what sorts of people are they looking for? What, like we have around the board table, we've looked for different people to join our board. We need to be looking at that across the whole. And then similarly, that kind of from sickness to prevention. So we can use that, I think, to kind of start to guide our teams on what sorts of people we need to be recruiting and how we need to be developing our staff.
As well as that, maybe, Ella, the sort of pipelines we have with Truro College, Cornwall College, Exeter, Plymouth.
Absolutely.
How pipelines being enriched to bring through the staff of tomorrow.
Yeah.
Okay, so I hope all this is helping you, Paul.
Very much so.
Could we go to Ray next, please?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's huge potential here to include voluntary sector as a factor in these conversations. I have had conversations recently, actually, with colleagues from Cornwall Foundation Trust about volunteering as a pathway into employment, out of employment as a planned step down towards retirement, and also for staff who may be long-term absent from work. And the other thing that I picked up that both Paul and David said was about a sort of notion of cross-sector portfolio working. And wouldn't it be marvellous if that included the voluntary sector as well? That would be a very rich thing indeed. So yeah, just some things that I think we can build definitely for the future.
Great, thank you, Ray. Really good ideas. Next is Adam, then Robin, and then Richard.
Thank you. Not echoing to an extent, and I'm kind of drawn to David's analogy of a ball on the field. It's great that we've got that ball on the field, so I really welcome the paper. Feels like we need to pass it around a bit now and have some iterations of this and not expect perfection at any point. And each time we do an iteration, this will get better. So as an example, the paper very well refers to neighbourhood working. We need to start putting a range on what that might look like in terms of our workforce and what proportion might move into neighbourhoods. That helps to then inform the asset management plans for the future in terms of what this site needs, what our other two main sites need. And it starts to get a real zing to it. So it's just getting those iterations and that synergy with the other plans. This could be really powerful if we get this right. Lots of the points that we've said have been raised at the People and Culture Committee already. So we need to keep coming back to this at the People and Culture Committee, please. But thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Robin.
Yeah, to add strengths to Ella's comments, I think we need to put some more energy into thinking how our services will look rather than it will be from the 10-year plan. It doesn't necessarily mean we will have less staff. It will mean we'll be delivering services in very different ways, and probably less in the physical buildings of ours, but it still may be our staff in different physical locations at Ella's point. I think I'd like to see more in here about how are we working with schools now, particularly that linkage through to our anchor status. How can we be showing people in schools today that in 10 years' time there's a career for you with us? And those careers range from plumbers, electricians, through to radiologists, radiographers, doctors, nurses, therapists. There's a whole plethora of skills that we can give people, and we can give some people some real hope, particularly in our deprived communities. And that, for me, that tie through then is that actually a well-educated population with good career prospects tends to be a healthier population. And so I just think there's something here about tying what does 10 years recruitment look like now? We've got some great learning. The theatres, anaesthetics did a lot of work getting into schools, training programs, the long burn programme that means that we don't see any agency spend in theatres as a result of that thought process that's put in, and we could do so much more of that.
Thank you.
I'm just checking the. So could we give Richard the final comment as chair?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I think Becky wants to.
Sorry, Becky, I missed you.
That's okay. I think it all links back to the culture, actually, and a connection to what else is on the football field, the different teams and the supporters and the referee, if we're using a football analogy.
We like football analogy.
Yeah. Because I think that's really important in terms of, the knowledge and insights and connection there is going to be so very important. And that co-creation. So I think that's really important moving forward, and I'd welcome more conversations on that.
I'm just going to bring Isabel in and then give Richard the last word, if that's okay.
Do you really want to bring me in?
I always want to bring you in.
I won't pass any comment on the football analogies. But no, I think the other thing for me is really importantly is that we've got a golden opportunity to look at where our skills gaps are, but not necessarily look inwardly at that. Look at Cornwall, at our population, at all our resources. So you mentioned the colleges, the schools. I would love to see us saying, who's really, really good at management development in the county? And if that isn't us, and it may not be CFT, and it may be the council, I don't know. But let's find out where our experts are, where our stars are, and bring them onto the field to play the game. Would that be enough of the football analogy?
That's beautiful. It is a beautiful game, isn't it?
Thank you. Thank you. It's a beautiful game. It's a beautiful game. All around.
It doesn't matter, you said.
Could be rugby.
Yeah, thanks for that, Isabel. So, Richard, can we go to you?
Yeah, just very quick. This was meant to be a starting point to have some words on paper that describes our aspirations and vision around a medium-term workforce plan, taking the lead from Ian's work around the medium-term finance plan. So it is meant and intended to be an iterative process. I should say that a lot of the things that have been discussed today, which are really, really helpful and valid, were discussed at People and Culture Committee. I think there's perhaps an issue that there isn't time to update the papers after People and Culture Committee to reflect the comments that we've had. And maybe that's a governance issue for all the papers, to be frank, and there is an intention to reflect AI, neighbourhood model, system reform, all the workforce, leadership, culture piece, and that alignment between workforce numbers and the financial challenges over the years. So you will see more, but it does need more kicking around, as Adam so eloquently said.
Okay, so not quite a hat trick then, Paul, but some good solid defensive and midfield work. We just need to do a bit more work up front now.
Sorry.
So in terms of the knitting, Richard, which is, I guess, this is sort of Chief Strategy Officer territory, but I think our idea was to have enabling strategies on people, money and things underpinning the trust strategies, and then joining them all up so they don't trip over each other.
Yes.
So we know what capital investment we need, we know what buildings and equipment we need, how many staff we need, what type of staff, and so on, to make sure that all our enabling strategies fit into the overall trust strategy.
It's really helpful, and I really like the idea of those being as live as possible documents rather than kind of dusty old documents that sit on a shelf and go out of date. I think it's that we're using it to guide what we're doing. Yeah.
So we've had good discussion. There's no apology for that, and that work will continue. Paul, thank you for everything you've done, because the hardest thing actually is to produce the document for people to critique. And it's all part of our overall enabling strategies. So I think if we could just note that with the board's comments for the work to continue, perhaps overseen by Ella, for the whole picture. It's now nearly 1 o'clock, so we aren't going to have the early lunch, I don't think. And we need to accelerate now, I think, or we'll have a late lunch. So could we go on to 14.2, the board diversity plan? And this is what you think.
Yeah, thank you. And with that in mind, Chair, I'll only cover a very brief summary of the report. So this is our board diversity plan, and it continues to provide a structured approach to improving diversity at our board and our senior leadership level, recognising that diversity is a core governance issue that strengthens our decision making. Progress has been made on a few of our actions, including completion of bespoke training on learning and disability and autism, and delivery of an EDI-focused development session back in April. The programme is supported through regular discussions at the Culture Committee and aligns with our wider culture transformation and EDI improvement agenda, but delivery has been particularly slow, and we've only progressed those two actions at the moment. I'm doing some more work with our communications colleagues about how we can better align and embed these actions into our existing communications and other opportunities. And I think the board should just note that progress is a little slower than planned. We'll take some more focused efforts on trying to improve the areas where we said that we would. We'll continue to monitor through People and Culture Committee. And if the board are content, we'll close the action that's proposed to complete, which is the EDI training in April. Happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Really helpful. Just to flag in my pack, I don't know if it's the same for others, on page 329, the formatting's gone a bit wrong, so the text is overlaid with other text. So just so that we might need to just reissue it so members of the public and things can see it clearer. Just on that point, Lindsay, do we think we need to include target dates for each one, just from a clarity perspective? So recognising some are slower than we would have hoped. I think having target dates in there, even if we don't achieve those, at least we can see what we were aiming for and then how far we are away from it, because it was difficult to understand how far it slipped at the moment in this presentation.
Good suggestion. Thanks, Ian. Subject to that and the the pace element, are we happy to move on? Thank you. Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, Adam.
Thank you, David. Sorry, Chair, I thought Bernie had a hand up on the previous item. I may have been wrong.
Have your hand up, Ben?
I just had one question.
Yes, please.
So, Lindsay, just reflecting the pace of comms, there is something about feeding back to the organisation about what we have done, I think, to make that much more overt, given the diversity that we've got around our workforce. But in the same way that we were discussing the learning piece, there is something about how we overtly say some of the real impactful things that we have done, recognising that there's still more to do.
And Uzma?
Yes, sorry, it was just a minor thing that maybe Lindsay and I could pick up afterwards about some of the terminology we're using when we're describing kind of groups, because I think as part of our wider comms plan, it can send a really clear message. So things like minority are terms that I know are widely used, but from a comms perspective, they're terms that are starting to kind of spark debate as to whether we should be calling, as we quite often do, our global majority or internationally recruited staff. So maybe we can just touch base on that, but a minor point.
Odd point. Thank you, Uzma. Could Lindsay, could you and Uzma discuss that offline so we get the terminology right? Thanks, Uzma. Can we go on to Audit and Risk Assurance Committee now then? Adam?
Okay. Thank you, David. I'll be brief. Lots of the things I was going to mention have been mentioned by a combination of Isabel, Adrian or Ian, I think, but just to be for completeness, the report you have in front of you is the report from our April meeting, which is kind of like an end of year report, which is assessed as part of our annual report, which is contained within item 19. I think we performed pretty well. So I need to echo what Isabel said and thank everybody who attended the committee from within RCHT, and at Audit and Risk Assurance Committee, we also have external attendees as well. So to thank them as well. In particular, thanks to the corporate governance team for all their support throughout the year. Items we covered in April, there was an element of looking back at 25, 26 financial year. So we looked at the draft annual report, the draft annual governance statement and the draft unaudited accounts, all of which reflect the financial information for year end 25-26, as Ian has talked us through already. I should say all of those were produced in record time. So to echo the thanks that's been said already to everybody involved in the production of the annual report, the annual governance statement and the unaudited accounts. We also considered, still part of thinking about 25-26, how we're doing against our external auditors' view on our value for money performance. So we consider a report on that carefully. The annual report, the annual governance statement and the draft unaudited accounts are going through an audit process at the moment, which Ian mentioned gets reported back through audit committee meeting in June and a special board meeting in June to review the conclusions of that process. The other thing we considered for 25-26 was any other internal audit reports in terms of the work plan from internal audit for 25-26. And just briefly, in terms of items we looked at for 26, 27 and beyond, we considered the internal audit plan for 26, 27 and actually for the next 3 years and challenged that around the risks we're facing and we're expecting to face as a trust. And we also considered the clinical audit plan for 26, 27 and particularly asked for some further work to benchmark our plan against similar trusts just to check that we're being robust in what we're planning to do. There was a number of other items we considered that are on our agenda today, including the board assurance framework, the standing orders and financial regulations, corporate risk register, the use of the trust seal and the policy on policies. And I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very good. Any questions or comments for Adam? So very comprehensive coverage. Thank you, Adam, for all the work the committee does. And that does, as you've signalled, take us on to the board assurance framework. Lindsay.
Thank you, Chair. So the staff is presented with track changes for ease of use. So I won't go into any of the detail. The reports were presented to committees in March and April, but no updates were made in April. So therefore, I think it'd be helpful to highlight some of the areas where we said that we will make further considerations. Particularly around the level of risk associated with the ability to comply with regulatory requirements associated with freedom of information requests and subject access requests and the impact on the organisation. The risk associated with the increase in the NEVR events that we've had recently and understanding any common themes. The risk of pausing go live of e-care and the subsequent impacts of any delay. The financial risks associated with our industrial action. The potential impact of the Devon system position on Cornwall and Scilly, and the level of risk relating to our trust estate. Obviously, over the last year, we've seen a number of severe weather impacts, and we also have known health and safety and fire matters, which we will be ensuring that are reflected on the board assurance framework. The BAF will be updated through executive review, and we are also undertaking a full and comprehensive review of the BAF associated with the new trust strategy so it aligns to our core objectives. One of the most recent discussions we've had through our Audit Risk Assurance Committee is the work that Adam has been undertaking with our through a system, a peninsula-wide audit forum, and one of the outcomes of that is around how we can work across the system to develop a system assurance framework and have them alignment with our assurance statements. So that work is still ongoing. Happy to answer any questions.
Excellent. I think you've covered all the risks that the board would recognise.
The one that was also raised in risk committee, Lindsay, was the revamping or the updating of the ED risk 25, noting the length of time and what else we needed to do, and probably we'll have to re-examine that after Robin, Bernie and Mary have met. I'm just conscious it's, as we spoke about at Executive Risk Group, we've come out of enhanced surveillance, but it remains a 25. So if we can just pick that up as well. Thank you.
And that's the risk of overcrowding in the emergency department. With that, Lindsay?
Yes, thank you.
Very important. Subject to that, are we happy? I won't read them all out, but are we happy to approve the closures and the risks as set out by the changes? Thank you. 15.2 standing orders. Can we approve these as read, Lindsay, or are there any you need to draw attention to?
Not really, just to say that most, in the main, they are points of clarity, learning from application of standing orders. They are clearly set out within the report, so if colleagues are happy, Audit Committee have recommended for approval.
We're being asked to approve changes to standing orders, standing financial instructions, and the scheme of delegation and matters reserved for the board as set out in the paper. Board happy? Thank you. Item 16 is Remuneration and Appointments Committee, which is chaired by the Senior Independent Director, Isabel.
Thank you. And I'll be very quick because it's already mentioned in the report that you've got a summary of the items that we discussed. I think for members of the public, it's just to be clear that this committee is formed of non-executive directors, with the exception of our non-exec director, who is also chair of the Audit Committee, who tends not to come so that we can maintain some independence. However, we have recently been inviting him to attend because one of the areas that obviously we have been looking at is the options for the future recruitment of a chief executive for our trust. So we meet as a group of non-executives. The chief executive and the chief people officer are both invited to attend as required, depending on the items being discussed. And you'll see within the paper the bullet points of the areas that the committee has covered recently within the last few months and continues to be quite busy at the moment. So we were hoping to go to a quarterly meeting, and I think we're back to far more than that at the moment, but because there's an awful lot for the committee to consider and decide on. So I'll stop there. If anybody has any questions, we'll try to answer them if I can.
Thanks, Isabel, and thanks for your wise leadership of the group. Any comments or questions for Isabel? Obviously, there's not too much we can say in public because this is about individuals. Thank you for that. Item 17, the Integrated Performance Report. It's an important source document for new members because it brings everything together. But the most important items we tend to have already discussed. Anything to add, Robin?
We definitely covered everything, but just to highlight, Isabel mentioned from the Quality Assurance Committee, the review from the breast cancer perspective. But normally we sit around this board table and talk about our overarching cancer performance as delivering to national standards. We did discuss in the committee, but our 28-day faster diagnostic standard and our 62-day, that's from referral to being treated standard, we're below the national requirements at the moment. That's being driven by three tumour sites in the main. So the breast that Isabel mentioned, urology and lung. And we've got deep dives for cancer coming to Finance Performance Committee with the performance lens and Quality Assurance Committee, the next meetings with the quality lens to get underneath some of the detail around that specific set of targets, colleagues. But other than that, we've covered everything during the meeting. Note in the IPR.
Okay. And thanks for your excellent stewardship of this report. Ian.
Yeah, the only point I think just to pull out, and we had a good discussion on it at Finance Performance Committee, is our elective performance. So we probably need to make sure as board level for everybody around this table that we factor in some of that. So particularly we talked about 65-week waits and the fact we still have 10 patients who are waiting over 65 weeks. There was a target to have achieved 0 65-week waits by September 25. So just in terms of, it's really well set out in the paper in the IPR, and we had that good discussion at Finance and Performance Committee, but we do need to make sure we keep that on our board agenda as well as the UEC elements, because it is going to be a particular focus, I think, at a national level.
Thank you, Ian. I mean, it's 10 too many, but it's considerably fewer than a lot of other trusts. But you're quite right. There was another hand up here.
Yeah, Ian's covered the point I was going to make, Chair. I was going to say that we did that deep dive and had an extended conversation around the metrics throughout the IPR.
Thanks, Adrian. Thanks for raising it, Ian. Anything else on the IPR? Otherwise, we discussed and noted. Thank you. We now turn ourselves into a charitable corporate trustee. in order to receive the Charitable Funds Committee Assurance Report, which is chaired by Richard.
Right, thank you. Just a minute on the performances of this committee. So first thing I want to say was that our overall fundraising target for 25-26 was 512,000 and our year-end total was 516,354. So a positive position for the charity. And I think that's really important, reflecting the current financial climate, the real strain on individuals, as well as corporate supporters. I think community fundraising was slightly below forecast. Event income exceeded expectations, driven by the Pink Wig Mermaid March, which we added to our charities portfolio. We've restructured the team so there's a single unified function, and we'll be, as we enter the new financial year, we'll ensure they'll have clear priorities and ambitious targets, and they include building sustainable income streams, particularly the launch of the new charity lottery, strengthening support engagement, and being better in showing impact, including some of our wonderful stories that really help in giving people the motivation to give, and so that motivation to support the charity arm remains strong. We also had news that we had received funding from NHS Together to fund a wellbeing initiative which will focus on supporting ethnic minority staff integration at St Michael's Hospital and the wider community in terms of providing support around buddying, housing, transport and wider networks. It was really good that this had been informed by the work of our staff networks, and that so it was shown it was led by our staff, and we were assured the scheme has been externally funded and is outcome focused. Just want to end on two things. One, just to talk about one of our events, because the London Marathon took place a couple of weeks ago. We had 7 runners who raised just under, so far, 19k. I just wanted to mention some examples. We had one individual who ran in support of the co-fund after being diagnosed with breast cancer in May 2024. Another individual ran for the Children's Cancer Fund in support of her daughter, a 16-year-old daughter who's had a rare form of cancer and has been undergoing chemotherapy. And another was Hannah Worcester on the St Mawes unit, who ran in support of the Surgical Robotic Fund, which really demonstrates her commitment to improving patient care beyond her clinical role. And finally, and in true charity fashion, I wanted to promote Cornwall's Great Cornish Cuppa and Cake event taking place on the 26th of June. And that aims to invites everyone to come together as friends, colleagues and families to a simple tea or coffee gathering, raising funds one cuppa at a time. We started this last year, and this year we're trying to grow participation with the ambition to have up to 50 events across Cornwall. And more information can be found on our website and social media. Thank you.
Really good. Thank you for the fantastic work that you do, and for everybody who gives philanthropic support to our charitable funds. Thank you, Richard. I will be entering the board for the London Marathon next year.
I'm going to offer to do the cuppa and the cake.
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay, we'll do the cuppa and cake instead. Thank you, Richard. Any questions for Richard? If not, I'd like to keep moving. That's all right. Item 19, I'd like to take as a start item, if that's okay, and take it as read, unless anyone's got anything to raise. Thank you. Section C lies on the table because nobody has unstarred any items, which takes us on to section D, other matters. The first one is item 25, which is the Company Secretary's summary of consideration of risk that's arisen at this meeting.
So obviously a number of the things that have risen to the discussion today are things that I've commented on when I presented the Board Assurance Framework, but other areas I think we should consider through from a corporate risk perspective or from a BAF perspective. There's the discussion we had earlier on about the Guardian Safe Working Hours presentation and the risk associated with fines. I think we should explore that further. There's the Matters that came up through Quality Assurance Committee, so the systematic breast pathway, the UEC, stroke, all matters that we've considered at committee, and we should probably better reflect on our board assurance framework. And as Kim articulated, the risk 9048, which is our highest risk around ED crowding, we've had that for quite a long time. So therefore, I think we should explore that a little further. Other areas around e-care particularly, and in light of the delay around e-care go live, we should explore that further in the board assurance framework, I think, Ella. As mentioned, industrial action will be forming part of BAF element 4, which is around our finances. So probably nothing further to add, Chair, I think.
That's great, thanks, Lindsay. I'm full of admiration at the way you capture all these risks throughout the meeting. Are there any which Lindsay has missed? So plenty of risk around then. Thank you, Lindsay. Item 26 is questions from the public. And again, could I hand over to you, Lindsay?
Thank you, Chair. We had good attendance today, up to nearly 50 people observing the meeting online. We've had 2 questions. We had a question ahead of the meeting today and one during the meeting. So the first question is saying that given the administration consultation has now been withdrawn, can the Trust confirm how much public money has been spent on the process that delivered no outcome? And why such a resource-intensive programme was pursued when the anticipated financial benefit was reported to be less than 1% of required savings? I'm going to go to Robin to answer the question.
Yes, thank you, Lindsay. So the proposed changes to our clinical administration are part of realigning our services, recognising that wider than in healthcare, administration services are changing. And it's also but noting that it did also deliver a cost reduction opportunity for us. The changes have not been withdrawn. Where we've agreed a pause in the consultation where we undertook further engagement with staff and union colleagues, and we remain working with our union colleagues with this process ongoing at this time. I wouldn't be able to comment much further. What I would say is, in terms of the resources that we allocated to this, was in the main our own resources. Our own colleagues have been leading this, and it was part of a wider programme of work where we had some external support in our overall financial recovery plan for last year. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Second question.
The second question was from Jane Bonnell, who's a regular observer of our board meeting. So thank you to Jane. She says, congratulate all involved in the welcome, albeit modest, improvements in flow through ED and corridor care. Given the problems are clearly across the NHS social care system, what resource are needed to ensure patients on wards as well as in ED see real improvements, and that the problem is really dealt with rather than pushed around the trust and indeed the wider system. What measures and solutions will reduce the use of corridor care on wards as well as ED, does not increase ambulance turnaround times, flow through ED and demand on ED, or readmissions for the same condition? I'm going to go to Robin again for that question.
Yes, thank you, Jane. So in the main, it's the delivery of the getting it right first time clinical operational standards. They are taken as best practice from around the country of where there's opportunity to deliver, I will say, faster care for patients, which will prevent us from being in that space, as you describe, of pushing the problem around the trust. Those standards help achieve that shorter length of stay, which is key critical to us eradicating corridor care and not increasing ambulance holds. Other actions around learning from other centres with regards to some of our medical models is key to that as well, because that gives us opportunity to change the way we work and deliver care differently for our patients. We are also working with our system partners, and there's a range of initiatives from a whole system perspective, and they range from how we can do things differently to prevent an attendance in the first instance, because if a patient doesn't attend the hospital, then they don't end up on a waiting list for an exit, and also working with how we can align better with our planning for patients who do need to exit with onward support. And some of the conversation we had in the urgent care update were alluding to those plans, Jane. In the main, our focus is on what's in the acute hospital's gift to make sure that we are acting as efficiently and as effectively as we possibly can. We know that there is wider system capacity that we are and when I say we, I mean whole system we, are struggling to fully utilise in that spirit of, in the main, the best bed for a patient is their own bed rather than in a hospital bed. And so, Jane, working in that collective way internally and with our partners, we don't want to be in a position where we're pushing the problem around, we're actively fixing it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robin. I thank members of the public as well.
Could I just say thank you to Jane, who I don't know, never met, because she is a regular contributor, and I think it's really important that we try to encourage questions coming from members of the public, and she always poses really intelligent, thought-provoking questions. So, Jane, whoever you are and wherever you are, thank you very much, and keep doing it, please.
Thank you, Jane. Item 27 is meeting effectiveness evaluation, and it's good practice for a board just to pause before the end, not to revisit decisions, but to just think about what went well and what might have been improved and so on. So could I just invite any reflections from board members on the meeting that we've had? Adrian.
I've got two, if I may, please, Chair. First one was the board story I thought was excellent. I can't think of a better one to show the value of patient-centred care and the strength of the patient's voice. So I thought that was really good. On a negative, 850 pages of papers to read. I know that we've got to do it, but for our new colleagues coming on board, it's probably, yeah, a bit scary. But those are my two reflections.
You know, I agree with you, Adrian. It was quite daunting. We did have some success early on in my reign, as it were, to get down to 300-400, but we're creeping back again. The only one bit of mitigation I'd say is that an awful lot of it was reporting, which was in section C for information. Well, not for information, but not for discussion. So I think we have to try and separate out the paperwork which is actually for us to discuss and the paperwork we have to receive because it's mandated, which is reports. But nevertheless, it's a fair point.
It's just that shock when you first go into admin control and it says 850 pages.
Yeah, so I thought having the break when we had it, so thank you. I think you moved it slightly earlier than we had it on the agenda. I think that was helpful in a 4-hour meeting, having that in the middle from a personal perspective. That was welcome. So thank you for that. In terms of the challenge on that, interestingly, Lindsay and Bernie and I were talking on a journey last week to London about admin control has a library function, so whether some of the documents can sit in a separate library function that you can go into. So it's not quite as daunting when you go into it. And I've already set the task for my team in terms of the finance report. What of it is must-have information and what of it is nice to have. So we are going to, for the start of the new financial year, with our report in particular, just look at that as well. So I think it's a good challenge.
Now that Copilot is up and running, you know, maybe the Secretariat could look at ways and means of AI assisting us in focusing on the things we really have to focus on as a board.
I think Richard was...
Yeah, the positive point I would want to make is I found at this meeting, we mentioned staff experience more than any other meeting, and it naturally was introduced in a lot of people's agendas. And that's really, really good. We're not just looking at it from one perspective, but we're looking at it through different lenses. So I think that was very positive.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the positives today has been hearing from new voices, actually. Yeah, so welcoming new board members, that's been really good. And I think also just to congratulate both our chief executive and our chief nurse, because this is their first board meeting in public today, stepping into different roles, and I thought they acquitted themselves beautifully. Thank you to both of them for their contributions. So I thought it was a really good meeting and well chaired.
Thank you as well.
Thank you.
And well vice chaired as well.
Of course.
I was just going to make the point for the new members as well. I thought you both made really good contributions, and I can see we made a very wise decision to bring primary care and BCSE into our tent. And we hope to reach out from our tent to your tents as well, so that we've just got one marquee.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, can I just echo? I think if any of our staff members, and I know they've already reached out and I've been invited to several places, I'd like to encourage us to absolutely keep role modelling. You do have a voice, we are listening, you can speak up. And I encourage us, whilst we all can't be visible, and visible is a really strange word, it doesn't make us not accessible. So I know we have started this journey, but I'd like to see more of us out and about and have some of that protected time to be able to do so. And for new people, please, very, very happy to buddy up, and Lindsay and I will look at the structure now. We have 4 divisions, how we do that divvying up. But I thought it was a really powerful message we've given today, and what I don't want us to do is not to be able to deliver. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I think we should give you the last word, and thank you for a very good debut. And it's now 13:29. Uzma is going to have the last word, actually. Uzma.
I don't want to take the last word from Kim. My only suggestion, David, was I find personally the deep dive conversations we have really valuable. And I wondered whether maybe in future public board meetings we could include some of those so that members of the public can kind of understand the depth we're going into with some subjects, which obviously when we're just reporting back from committee, they're not really getting insight into those. But maybe Lindsay might find that there's certain subjects that we could do a deeper dive in public meetings.
Thank you, Uzma. I'm sure Lindsay will take that under advisement. So it's now 1:30. The date of our next meeting is the 2nd of July, our next meeting in public. So I'm going to close this meeting with thanks for your attendance. And could we reconvene at 2 o'clock for the board in private, please? Thank you all very much.